Welcome back, legends, and if you're new here, welcome to HarryFix. This channel is dedicated to powerful Harry Potter what-if stories where we explore alternate destinies, hidden power awakenings, and the darker, untold secrets of the wizarding world. Quick note before we begin. This video is self-recorded and fully created in line with YouTube's latest policies. Every story on this channel is originally written, creatively edited, and made purely for storytelling and entertainment. What if 2-year-old Harry Potter was left at Spinner's End, and Severus Snape forged him into a potions prodigy? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, make sure to subscribe to HarryFix. Now, let the story begin.
The night was a thick, suffocating blanket over Cokeworth. Rain, not the gentle sort but a relentless, grimy drizzle, slicked the cobblestones of Spinner's End and wept from the chimneys of the cramped, soot-stained houses. In number 9, the only light was a weak, jaundiced glow from a single bare bulb in the front room upstairs, fighting a losing battle against the oppressive dark. Severus Snape sat in an armchair that had surrendered its comfort years ago, a heavy book open on his lap. The words were a familiar dance of ingredients and incantations, a solace he had clung to since childhood. But tonight, the dance was a blur. A cold knot of fury and a deeper, more terrifying emotion, a grief so profound it felt like a physical wound, had taken residence in his chest. Lily was dead. He had felt it. A tearing in the very fabric of his being, a silent scream in the magical ether that only he seemed to have heard. The Dark Lord was gone, vanquished by a child, by her child. And now, the world was being remade by fools and sycophants. Dumbledore, with his twinkling eyes and cryptic pronouncements, had no doubt already swept in to orchestrate the narrative, to place the boy in a gilded cage. The knock on the door, when it came, was not a knock at all. It was a faint, scrabbling sound, like a wounded animal seeking shelter. Snape's wand was in his hand before he was fully conscious of moving, the worn floorboards cold under his bare feet. He descended the narrow stairs, the darkness familiar as an old enemy. With a flick, the rusty bolt slid back. The cold air hit him first, laced with the acrid scent of wet ash from the mill. Then he saw it, a basket, a plain, wicker laundry basket, sitting on his filthy doorstep. It was soaked, a small puddle forming beneath its base. And inside, swaddled in a blanket that was more damp wool than warmth, was a child. For a long, suspended moment, Snape could only stare. The child was small, impossibly small. A tuft of jet black hair, impossibly messy, stuck up from its head. A tiny fist, clenched even in sleep, rested against its cheek. There was a mark on its forehead, a fresh, angry cut in the shape of a bolt of lightning, stark against the pale skin. The world tilted. The knot in his chest constricted, threatening to choke him. It was his hair. It was her eyes. Even closed, he knew they would be that exact shade of green, the color of a fresh spring leaf, the color he had drowned in 1,000 times in his memory. Leave him, a voice, cold and reptilian, hissed from the depths of his soul. He is the reason she is gone. He is Potter's brat. Leave him to the mercy of the night. It would be a kindness. His hand, moving as if of its own accord, reached out. His long, pale fingers, stained with potion's ingredients, brushed the damp blanket. The child stirred, a tiny, reedy whimper escaping its lips. The fist unclenched, and the minuscule fingers wrapped instinctively around Snape's index finger. The grip was surprisingly strong. And warm. A fresh wave of grief, sharp and blinding, washed over him. He saw Lily's face, not as the beautiful woman she had become, but as the girl on the playground, laughing as she showed him the flower that had magically bloomed in her palm. He saw her on the train, her nose wrinkled in disdain as he called her a mudblood, the word a poison dart that had festered in his gut for a decade. He saw her in the clearing, begging for her life, for her son's life, and then the flash of green light. Tears, hot and utterly foreign, blurred his vision. He hadn't cried since he was a boy, since his father's belt had taught him that tears were a sign of weakness to be exploited. But now, standing in the doorway of his miserable childhood home, with the rain chilling his bones and Lily's son holding his finger, he wept. The cold voice was drowned out by another, a whisper that was pure Lily. Look at him, Sev. He's just a baby. He has no one else. With a gentleness that would have astonished anyone who knew him, Snape lifted the basket. He carried it inside, through the cramped, dusty kitchen, and up the narrow stairs to the front room. He placed the basket on the rug before the unlit fireplace. The child's eyes fluttered open. Green. They were green. So impossibly green, and wide, and filled with the silent, profound confusion of a toddler whose world had just ended. He stared up at the pale, gaunt face looming over him, and for a terrifying second, Snape expected him to scream. To recoil from the monstrous man before him. Instead, the boy, Harry, his mind supplied, his name is Harry, just looked at him. The tiny fist still held his finger. Then, a single, fat tear welled up in one green eye and traced a path through the grime on his cheek. He didn't cry. He just leaked. A silent, heartbroken testament to a trauma his mind was too young to process. Something inside Severus Snape broke. The walls he had so carefully constructed, the armor of bitterness and spite, crumbled to dust. He knelt, the movement stiff and unfamiliar. He didn't know what to do. He knew how to brew draught of living death, how to defend against a Dementor, how to navigate the treacherous currents of the Dark Lord's inner circle. He had no idea how to comfort a child. He pulled his hand free, and Harry's face crumpled in distress. Moving swiftly, Snape went to his small, cluttered bedroom. He returned with a clean, if threadbare, pillowcase. Gently, so gently, he lifted the sodden blanket away from the baby. Harry was wearing a thin, damp sleepsuit. He was shivering. Snape worked quickly, his long fingers surprisingly deft. He peeled off the wet clothes, revealing the tiny, fragile body. He wrapped him in the soft, dry pillowcase, then pulled his own winter cloak, a heavy black woolen one, from its peg on the door. He wrapped that around the bundle as well, creating a warm cocoon. He picked up the basket again and carried it to his armchair. He sat down, settling the basket on his lap. Harry, swaddled in black, stared up at him, his shivering slowly subsiding. Snape began to rock, a slow, unconscious rhythm. He didn't know he was doing it. The fire in the grate was nothing but cold ash, relics of the last time he had tried to make this place a home. With a flick of his wand, a jet of flame erupted from the tip and caught the kindling he had laid days ago. The fire caught, crackling to life, and warm light filled the room, chasing the shadows back into the corners. Harry's eyes, reflecting the flames, drifted closed. The grip on Snape's thumb loosened. His tiny chest rose and fell in the steady rhythm of sleep. Snape sat there for a long time, the basket a warm weight on his lap. He stared into the fire, the flames licking and dancing. The future, which had seemed so bleak and empty just an hour ago, was now a terrifying, uncharted territory. He had no plan. He had no idea how to raise a child, let alone the boy who lived. The wizarding world would be looking for him. Dumbledore would have his own plans. They would come. But not tonight. Tonight, there was just the crackle of the fire, the rhythm of the rain against the window, and the soft, warm weight of Lily's son sleeping peacefully in his arms. A vow, silent and fierce, solidified in Snape's heart. It was not a vow spoken to Dumbledore, or to any abstract notion of good. It was a vow spoken to the sleeping child in his arms, and to the ghost of the girl he had loved and lost. He would not let them put Harry in a cupboard under the stairs. He would not let him be raised by muggles who would fear and resent him. He would not let him grow up lonely, unloved, and full of self-loathing, as he had. He didn't know how, but he would forge this boy. Not into a weapon, not into a symbol, but into something strong. Something capable of surviving. He would give him the one thing Lily would have wanted for him, the one thing Severus Snape had never truly had, a protector. The fire burned low, the embers glowing a deep, sleepy orange. In the armchair, the man in black and the child in the basket slept, two broken souls clinging to each other in the aftermath of a storm. The ash of the old world was cold, but in its echoes, a new, terrifying, and fragile bond was being forged. Chapter 2, The Green-Eyed Apprentice. 5 years. 5 years of nappies, of sterilizing bottles, of learning to interpret the nuances of a baby's cry. 5 years of sleepless nights, of potions for colic and teething, of wards so complex they made his head spin, layered over the tiny house at Spinner's End to hide them from the world. The wizarding world believed Harry Potter had been taken in by his muggle aunt, as per Dumbledore's decree. They believed he was growing up in a nice, normal house in Surrey. The lie was a bitter pill Severus swallowed every day, a necessary poison to keep the boy safe. But now, as a damp, Gray morning pressed against the window of his makeshift laboratory. Snape watched a 7-year-old Harry, perched on a rickety stool, his small brow furrowed in concentration. The boy was painstakingly slicing dittany leaves. His technique was clumsy, the cuts uneven, but his focus was absolute. "Your wrist is too stiff," Snape said, his voice a low monotone. He didn't move from his position by the cauldron. "A paring knife is not a sword, Harry. It requires finesse, not force. Let the blade do the work." Harry's small fingers adjusted their grip. He tried again, the silver blade glinting in the candlelight. This cut was cleaner, more precise. A flicker of pride, quickly suppressed, crossed his features. He looked up at Snape, his green eyes seeking approval. Snape merely gave a curt nod. "Adequate. Continue." This was their world. The narrow kitchen had been converted years ago, the rickety table replaced with a sturdy workbench. The walls were lined with shelves groaning under the weight of bottled ingredients, dried roots, pickled creatures, shimmering liquids in every color of the spectrum. The air was perpetually thick with the earthy, metallic, and often acrid smells of potion making. It was the smell of home to Harry. He didn't remember the basket, or the cold night. His earliest memories were of this man, with his billowing black clothes and his sharp, quiet voice. Of the strict routines, the lessons that began as soon as he could hold a spoon. He was not coddled. There were no bedtime stories about brave knights, only detailed explanations of the properties of bezoar stones or the correct way to stir a cure for boils. But there was also a fierce, if unspoken, protection. When Harry had fallen and gashed his knee at age 4, Snape hadn't scooped him up with soothing words. He had knelt, examined the wound with clinical precision, and then silently applied a cooling paste he had brewed himself. The pain had vanished instantly. He had then cleaned the wound, applied a sterile bandage, and without a word, lifted Harry onto his hip and carried him to his small, sparsely furnished bedroom. He had sat on the edge of the bed until Harry fell asleep, his long, cool fingers absently stroking his hair. That was love, Harry had learned. It wasn't loud. It was in the silences, in the small acts of care, in the solid, unwavering presence of the man he called, Sir. Sir. Harry's voice was quiet, hesitant. He knew better than to interrupt. The brewing process. Snape's eyes, dark and intense, flicked towards him from the simmering cauldron. "What is it? Why do we have to hide?" The question hung in the air, thick as the steam from the potion. Snape's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He had always known this day would come. He had prepared speeches, explanations, but now, faced with those guileless green eyes, all his carefully constructed words felt like hollow lies. He lowered the flame under the cauldron with a wave of his hand. He turned fully to face Harry, his expression unreadable. "Come here." Harry slid off the stool and walked over, standing before the tall, gaunt man. Snape looked down at him for a long moment. "Do you know why you live with me, and not with other people?" Snape asked. "Because my parents are dead," Harry stated, a simple fact he had known as long as he could remember. "And you knew my mum." Snape flinched, a tiny, nearly invisible tremor. "Yes, I knew your mother." The words were heavy, dragged from a deep well. "She was a remarkable witch. Kind, brave. And your father," he paused, the name like acid on his tongue. He swallowed the bitterness. "Your father was also brave, in his own way. They died to protect you, Harry. From a very powerful and evil wizard." Harry's eyes widened. He knew the story, in fragments. "But, sir, never spoke of it willingly. Is he the reason we hide?" "Yes," Snape said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "He is gone, but his followers, those who believed in his cause, are not. They would see you not as a child, but as a symbol. A trophy. Or a threat to be eliminated." He knelt, bringing himself to Harry's eye level. It was a gesture of such vulnerability that it made Harry's heart clench. "The world out there is not safe for you, Harry. Your name, it carries a weight you cannot possibly comprehend. They would take you from me, put you on display, twist you into something you are not. I will not allow that." He reached out, his long fingers gently brushing the scar on Harry's forehead. "This mark, it is why they fear you, and why they would covet you. It is a reminder of what happened that night. A night of great darkness, and a single, impossible light." Harry looked up at him, his young mind struggling to process the enormity of it. He didn't feel like a symbol. He felt like a boy who got in trouble for not slicing his dittany leaves thin enough. "Will they ever stop looking for me?" Snape's gaze was unwavering. Perhaps one day. When you are older. When you are strong enough to face them. Until then, you have your lessons. You have your potions. You have, he stopped, the word, me, getting caught in his throat. He stood up abruptly, the moment of intimacy broken. You have this place. And for now, that must be enough. He turned back to his cauldron, his robe swishing. Your Dittany leaves. Are they finished? Harry looked at the small pile of imperfectly sliced leaves. Almost, sir. Then finish them. A potion brewed with distraction is a potion destined for failure. Harry returned to his stool, a strange mixture of fear and a fierce, protective love for the dark, brooding man filling his small chest. The world outside was a scary place filled with people who wanted to hurt him. But inside these four walls, with the bubbling cauldrons and the sharp scent of asphodel, he was safe. He was being forged into something. He wasn't sure what yet. A potions prodigy, perhaps. Or maybe, just maybe, something strong enough to one day step out of the shadows and face the world head-on. That night, after a simple dinner of soup and bread, Harry lay in his bed, the room illuminated by the faint glow of the street lamp outside his small window. The door creaked open. He didn't need to turn to know who it was. He heard the soft rustle of robes, the quiet tread of feet on the worn floorboards. Snape didn't speak. He simply stood in the doorway for a moment, a tall, dark silhouette. Then, he walked to the side of the bed. He reached down and, with a gentleness that would have shocked the world, tucked the thin blanket more securely around Harry's shoulders. He stood there for a moment longer. Then, so softly Harry almost thought he imagined it, he heard a whisper. Sleep well, Harry. The door closed with a soft click. In the darkness, Harry smiled. He was Harry. Not the boy. Not a symbol. Just Harry. And he was exactly where he belonged. Chapter 3. The First Foray. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, carried not by an owl, but by a disheveled-looking jackdaw that pecked irritably at the grimy kitchen window. Snape, who was decanting a shimmering, silvery potion into crystal phials, froze. He recognized the seal on the parchment before he even opened the casement. The phoenix, the D, in the center. Albus Dumbledore. He took the letter, his face a mask of stone, and dismissed the bird with a curt nod. He didn't open it in front of Harry, who was diligently grinding beetle eyes into a fine powder at the workbench. He slipped it into an inner pocket of his robes and continued with his work, his movements precise but his mind a whirlwind of dark possibilities. That night, after Harry was asleep, he sat in his armchair and broke the seal. The letter was typically Dumbledore, long, meandering, and full of a gentle condescension that made Snape's teeth grind. It spoke of the summer, of the necessity of tradition, of a place where Harry could begin to understand his heritage. Hogwarts. He wanted Harry to attend Hogwarts. He spoke of the boy's safety, of the ancient magic protecting the castle, of the need for him to be among his own kind. Snape read it 3 times, each time a fresh wave of fury and fear washing over him. His own kind. What did Dumbledore know of his kind? Had he been hunted his entire life? Had he been forced to hide in the shadows, learning to be invisible, learning to be silent, just to survive? No. Dumbledore saw a neat little savior, a perfect little Gryffindor, to be slotted into the grand narrative he was weaving. He thought of Harry, his Harry. The boy who could identify a bezoar before he could properly read. The boy whose small hands were steady as a surgeon's when stirring a volatile potion. The boy who looked at Snape not with fear, but with a quiet, trusting adoration. He imagined him at Hogwarts, surrounded by boisterous, mindless children like his father. He imagined him being swayed by their shallow charm, being taught by a bumbling oaf like Hagrid about the wonders of a world that had tried to destroy him. He imagined him being taken from Snape, their bond weakened, replaced by them. He wouldn't allow it. He couldn't. But a cold, logical part of his mind, the part that had kept him alive as a spy, whispered a different truth. He couldn't keep Harry hidden forever. The boy needed more than potions. He needed to learn about magic in its broader sense. Defense, transfiguration, charms. He needed to learn how to control the power that Snape could sense, coiled and waiting, within him. And Snape, for all his brilliance, was not a teacher of everything. He was a master of the dark arts and potions, but a charms teacher, he was not. The conflict raged within him for days. He became more withdrawn, more sharp with Harry, who, sensing his guardian's turmoil, became quieter and more diligent than ever, a desperate plea for approval in every perfectly sliced root and evenly stirred potion. Finally, Snape made a decision. He would not let Harry go to Hogwarts unprepared. He would give him a taste of the world, on his own terms. A controlled foray. He would take him to Diagon Alley. The following Saturday, he stood Harry in the middle of the front room. "We are going out," he said, his voice brooking no argument. Harry's eyes widened in disbelief. "Out, sir. Out, outside. Do not look so astonished. Put on your coat. The one with the large pockets." The coat was another of Snape's modifications, charmed to be warmer than it looked and, more importantly, to hold a small emergency kit of potions and a disguised portkey. The journey was a blur of unfamiliar sensations for Harry. The world outside the house was loud, bright, and terrifyingly open. He stayed close to Snape's side, his small hand gripping a fold of his guardian's robes as they walked through the grimy Muggle streets of Cokeworth. People looked at them, at the tall, grim man in black and the small, dark-haired boy clinging to him, but no one spoke. They stopped in a dingy, graffiti-covered alley. Snape looked around, ensuring they were alone, then held out his hand to Harry. "Take my arm, firmly, and do not let go." Harry obeyed, his heart hammering against his ribs. The world squeezed, a horrible lurch behind his navel, and then, with a silent pop, they were standing in a bustling, cobblestone street that was nothing short of miraculous. The leaky cauldron was behind them, and before them, Diagon Alley spread out in a riot of color, sound, and magic. Harry's breath caught in his throat. Owls hooted from shop windows, cauldrons clinked outside a bustling store, and the smell of fresh parchment, cauldron polish, and something sweet and sugary filled the air. His head swiveled, trying to take it all in at once. Witches and wizards in every shade of robe bustled past, some carrying strange creatures in cages, others laden with books. Snape watched him, his expression guarded. He saw the wonder in the boy's eyes, the pure, unadulterated joy. It was a stark contrast to the dim, silent world of Spinner's End. A sliver of doubt pierced his resolve. Was he wrong to keep him from all this? "Come," he said, his voice gruffer than he intended. He led a wide-eyed Harry down the street, past Flourish and Blots, past Madame Malkin's, their destination clear in his mind. Ollivander's. The wand shop was narrow and dusty, filled with thousands of narrow boxes stacked to the ceiling. An old man with pale, silvery eyes emerged from the shadows, his gaze immediately falling on Harry. "Ah," he said, his voice a soft whisper on the air. "Yes. I wondered when I'd be seeing you, Mr. Potter." Harry flinched at the name. He looked up at Snape, who gave a barely perceptible nod of reassurance. Ollivander moved closer, his eyes fixed on the scar on Harry's forehead. "You have your mother's eyes. I remember when she came for her first wand. Willow, 9 inches, swishy. Excellent for charm work." He looked at Snape. "And you, Severus, still using the same make, I see." Snape said nothing. Ollivander turned back to Harry. "Let us see what chooses you, young man." What followed was a whirlwind of boxes and wands. Harry would wave one, and Ollivander would tut and take it back, muttering about dragon heartstring being too unyielding, or phoenix feather being too eager. Wand after wand failed, the shop filling with showers of sparks and gusts of wind. Then, Ollivander paused, a thoughtful look on his face. He disappeared into the depths of the shop and returned with a dusty box. Holly and phoenix feather. 11 inches. Nice and supple. As soon as Harry's fingers closed around the warm handle, a feeling of intense, comforting warmth flooded through him. Golden sparks cascaded from the tip like a fountain, showering them both in light. Ollivander's eyes gleamed. "Curious," he breathed. "Very curious." "What is?" Harry asked, his voice small. "Mr. Ollivander fixed his pale eyes on Harry's scar. "The phoenix whose feather is in your wand gave another feather. Just one other. It is very curious indeed that you should be destined for this wand when its brother gave you that scar." The temperature in the shop seemed to drop several degrees. Snape's hand closed protectively on Harry's shoulder, a solid, grounding weight. Harry looked from the wand in his hand to the scar on his forehead, a new, chilling understanding dawning in his young mind. The evil wizard who killed his parents, his wand was connected to this one. They were brothers. The wonder of Diagon Alley was suddenly overshadowed by a cold, creeping fear. He looked up at Snape, his green eyes wide. Snape looked down at him, and for a fleeting second, Harry saw not the stern guardian, but the same flicker of fear and fierce protection he had seen that night in his bedroom. Without a word, Snape paid for the wand, his movements sharp and abrupt. He guided Harry out of the shop and back into the bustling alley. But the magic had dimmed for Harry. The world was no longer just a place of wonder, it was a place of dangerous, invisible connections. As they made their way back to the leaky cauldron, Harry's hand tightened its grip on Snape's robes. The name, Potter, was a target. His scar was a map of a dark history. And his wand was linked to the very monster who had orphaned him. He had wanted to see the world, but now he understood why Snape had kept him hidden. The world was beautiful, yes. But it was also watching, and waiting, and it knew his name. Chapter 4, The Serpent's Tooth. The journey back to Spinner's End was silent. Harry clutched his new wand in its box as if it were a lifeline, the echo of Ollivander's words a cold stone in his stomach. Snape's face was a thundercloud, his long strides eating up the pavement, forcing Harry to half-run to keep up. Once inside the familiar gloom of number 9, Snape spelled the locks and turned to face the boy. "Give me the wand." Harry's grip tightened. "But sir, it's mine. I am not going to confiscate it, you foolish boy. I need to examine it." The sharp words were a defense mechanism, a way to push back the tide of emotion that threatened to drown him. The wand. The brother wand. Of all the infernal coincidences. Harry reluctantly handed it over. Snape took it, holding it as if it were a live serpent. He felt the warmth still lingering in the wood, the thrum of latent power. It was a powerful wand, he could tell. A wand for great things. And its brother was in the hands of the Dark Lord, somewhere, waiting. The connection was a tether, a vulnerability he hadn't anticipated. He handed it back. "Keep it safe. It is an extension of yourself now. Treat it with respect, or it will fail you when you need it most." He turned away, his mind racing. The protective wards he had layered over the house were strong, but were they strong enough to hide Harry from a connection this deep? He spent the next week in a frenzy of magical activity, adding new layers of obscurement, charms to block scrying and tracking, all focused on the small, neat box under Harry's bed. He taught Harry basic occlumency, the art of clearing the mind, framing it as another potions exercise, a way to focus his intentions. "A cluttered mind leads to a scorched cauldron," he would say, and Harry, eager to please, would try to empty his thoughts, to build the mental walls Snape described. The fear that gripped Snape was a familiar one, an old friend. It was the fear of exposure, of loss, of Lily being taken from him all over again. It hardened his resolve. If Harry was to survive in this world, he couldn't just be a potions prodigy. He needed to be more. He needed to be formidable. He needed to be able to protect himself. The gentle lessons in potion making began to shift. They were still the foundation, the core of their work, but Snape started introducing other elements. He taught him simple defensive spells, their incantations whispered in the quiet of the front room. Protega. Expelliarmus. Harry's first, wobbly shield charm sent a vase crashing from the mantelpiece. Snape didn't punish him. He simply said, again. Focus your intent. See the shield, don't just say the word. He taught him about the dark arts, not to use them, but to recognize them. He would describe the effects of various curses, the telltale signs of dark magic, the creatures that serve the Dark Lord. He spoke of Dementors, the guards of the wizard prison, Azkaban, and the despair they brought. Harry listened, his young mind absorbing it all, the world outside their walls becoming a more defined, more terrifying place with each lesson. One evening, after a particularly grueling session on the theory of nonverbal spells, Harry looked up at him. "Sir, will I have to fight him? The one who gave me this?" He touched his scar. The question hung in the air, raw and painful. Snape looked at the boy, at the mixture of fear and a nascent, flickering determination in his green eyes. He could lie. He could offer false comfort. But he had never lied to Harry. Lies were a foundation for weakness. "I don't know," he said, his voice quiet. "I hope not. I will do everything in my power to ensure you never have to. But you must be prepared. A potion master does not wait until the last ingredient is needed to begin brewing. He prepares long in advance. He anticipates. You must do the same." Harry nodded slowly, the weight of the words settling on his small shoulders. He didn't fully understand, but he understood one thing: his guardian was preparing him for a war. The years that followed were a blur of intense, disciplined training. By the time he was 9, Harry could brew a complex pepper-up potion without referring to a recipe. At 10, he could consistently produce a corporeal Patronus. It took the form of a stag, a magnificent, shimmering creature of silver light that would gallop around the small front room, filling it with a warmth that chased away all shadows. Snape watched, his heart aching with a pride he could never voice. A stag, just like his father. The irony was a bitter pill, but even he couldn't deny the beauty of it. He taught Harry to fight, not with a wand at first, but with his mind. Occlumency became a daily ritual. Snape would probe his mind, a gentle but insistent pressure, and Harry would fight to keep him out, to build his walls higher and stronger. It was exhausting, but Harry persisted, driven by the desire to master himself, to be worthy of the effort Snape was pouring into him. Their relationship deepened. The formal, "Sir," remained in place during lessons, a necessary boundary. But in the quiet evenings, when they ate their dinner in companionable silence, or when Snape would read aloud from advanced potions texts, his voice a low, melodic monotone, the lines blurred. Harry would sometimes lean against his guardian's arm, a simple, childish gesture of affection. Snape would stiffen for a moment, unused to such contact, but he never pulled away. One night, just before Harry's 11th birthday, another letter came. This time, it was delivered by a proud, stern-looking barn owl. Harry's hands trembled as he broke the emerald green seal. It was his Hogwarts letter. It was real. He read it aloud to Snape, his voice filled with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. When he finished, he looked up. "What do I do?" Snape took the letter from him, reading it slowly. His face was, as always, unreadable. Finally, he set it down on the workbench between them. "You go." Harry stared at him, shocked. "But, you said they would take me away. You said I wasn't safe." "I said the world out there is not safe. And it isn't. But hiding you forever is no longer an option. You are ready, Harry. More ready than any other 11-year-old in living memory. You have the skills, the knowledge, and the discipline to survive." He paused, his dark eyes boring into Harry's. "Hogwarts is not just a school. It is a place of ancient magic, some of the most powerful protective enchantments in the world. You will be safer within its walls than you are here. And he hesitated, the next words costing him a great deal. "I will be there." Harry's eyes widened. "You will. I am the potions master at Hogwarts. I have been for many years." He said it as if it were a mundane fact, not the monumental revelation it was. "You're a teacher." Harry breathed, a new, unimaginable reality dawning on him. His guardian, his stern, private, brilliant guardian, was a professor. He would see him at school. He wouldn't be alone. A fragile hope began to bloom in his chest, pushing back the fear. He looked at the letter, then at Snape. He wasn't just being sent into the world. He was being sent with a guardian angel, cloaked in black, armed with a sharp tongue and a cauldron full of potions. He had been forged in the fires of Spinner's End. He was ready. Chapter 5, The Weight of a Name. King's Cross Station was an assault on the senses. The sheer noise, the screech of brakes, the roar of engines, the cacophony of 1,000 echoing conversations, pounded against Harry's ears. The smells were foreign and sharp: diesel fumes, warm pastry, and the metallic tang of the tracks. He stayed close to Snape, his trunk levitating discreetly behind them, his owl, a small, sooty gray creature he had named Ash, shifting in her cage. Snape was a fortress of calm in the chaos, his black robes parting the sea of muggles like a ship's prow. He led Harry to the barrier between platforms 9 and 10. "This is it," Snape said, his voice low. He looked down at Harry, and for a fleeting moment, his mask slipped. Harry saw a flicker of something: pride, fear, and a deep, abiding love he would never put into words. "Remember what I have taught you. Trust your instincts. Your potions kit is in the left-hand pocket of your trunk, along with a phial of strengthening solution and a bezoar. Do not hesitate to use them." "I won't, sir." Harry's voice was small, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. And Harry, Snape's hand, surprisingly warm, rested on his shoulder for a brief second. "Be wary. Not everyone who smiles at you is a friend. Your name carries weight. Some will want to use it. Others will resent it. Let your actions, not your name, define you." Harry nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He wanted to hug him, to thank him for 10 years of silent protection, for forging him into someone capable of this moment. But he knew that wasn't their way. Instead, he just met his guardian's eyes and gave a small, firm nod. "I will, sir." Snape gave a curt nod in return, then turned and strode away, disappearing into the crowd without a backward glance. Harry watched him go, a sudden, terrifying wave of loneliness washing over him. He took a deep breath, gripped the handle of his trunk, and walked straight at the barrier between platforms 9 and 10. He didn't even slow down. The impact never came. Instead, he was suddenly on a different platform, a steam engine the color of freshly poured ink hissing and chuffing before him. The scarlet steam engine was a lie he'd read about. This one was a beautiful, gleaming black. The Hogwarts Express. The platform was a swirl of activity. Families were saying goodbye. Children were laughing, owls hooted, and cats of every color weaved between legs. Harry felt a pang of something, envy, perhaps, as he watched a boy with fiery red hair being hugged tightly by a plump, tearful woman. He had no one to see him off. He found an empty compartment near the end of the train and stowed his trunk. He sat by the window, watching the last of the students board, a strange, hollow feeling in his chest. He was alone, surrounded by hundreds of his own kind. The compartment door slid open. A boy about his age stood there, his face round and friendly, a sleepy-looking rat poking out of his jacket pocket. He had the same fiery red hair as the boy on the platform. "Anyone sitting there?" he asked, pointing to the seat opposite Harry. "Everywhere else is full." Harry shook his head. The boy grinned and hopped up, stowing his own trunk. "I'm Ron Weasley." "Harry," he replied, then paused. He knew he should give his full name, but the word felt heavy. "Harry Potter." Ron's jaw dropped. He stared at Harry, his eyes white as saucers. You're Harry Potter," he whispered. His gaze dropped to Harry's forehead, as if he could see the scar through his fringe. "Is it true? You've got the..." Self-consciously, Harry pushed his hair back, revealing the lightning bolt scar. Ron's reaction was immediate and explosive. "Bloody hell," he shouted, then clapped a hand over his mouth, looking around as if he expected teachers to appear. "So you're the boy who lived. Everyone thought you were, raised by muggles or something. But your clothes are all right." He looked at Harry's plain, well-made clothes, Snape's idea of inconspicuous. Harry didn't know what to say. Snape's warning echoed in his mind. "Your name carries weight." Here was proof. He wasn't just Harry. He was the boy who lived. He was a story. The journey was a revelation. Ron, for all his initial shock, was easy to talk to. He came from a large, poor but loving family. He complained about his hand-me-down robes and his brother's achievements, and he was fascinated by Harry's life. Harry, cautious, told him a carefully edited version. He spoke of his guardian, a professor, but didn't name him. He mentioned his intense home-schooling, but glossed over the specifics. He talked about potions, and Ron's nose wrinkled. "Ah, potions. My brother Percy says Snape's an absolute nightmare. You don't want to get on the wrong side of him. Everyone's terrified of him." Harry's heart gave a strange little lurch. He knew Snape was feared, but to hear it from an outsider was jarring. He simply nodded, offering a non-committal, "Oh." The compartment door slid open again, this time without a knock. A girl with bushy brown hair and a bossy voice stood there. "Have you seen a toad?" A boy named Neville's lost his. When they said no, she looked at Harry's outstretched hand, where he was absently twirling his wand. "Are you sure that's a good idea? We haven't been taught any spells yet. I've been trying a few, just for practice, Oculus Reparo." "Well, that didn't work." She launched into a detailed account of her reading, her eyes landing on his scar. Her mouth formed a small, "Oh. You're Harry Potter. I'm Hermione Granger. And you are," she added, turning to Ron. The dynamic was set. Ron was easygoing and loyal. Hermione was intense and eager. Harry found himself in the middle, a strange new feeling of companionship. It was messy, loud, and nothing like the quiet order of Spinner's End. And he found he didn't entirely dislike it. As the train carried them north, the landscape growing wilder and duskier, Harry felt the first tendrils of belonging. It was fragile, this new feeling, but it was there. He wasn't just Snape's apprentice anymore. He was Harry, Ron, and Hermione. And ahead lay a castle full of magic, of danger, and of a destiny he was only just beginning to understand. The train began to slow. A voice echoed through the corridor. "We will be reaching Hogwarts in 5 minutes. Please leave your luggage on the train, it will be taken up to the school separately." A wave of nervous excitement rippled through the compartment. Harry pulled his cloak tighter, the familiar weight of the small potions kit in his pocket a silent comfort. He was ready. He had to be. As they piled out of the train onto the dark, chilly platform, a giant of a man with a wild beard and boar-like eyes bellowed, "Furs years. Furs, years over here. All right there, Harry." Harry blinked, startled. The man, Hagrid, beamed down at him. "Last time I saw you, you was only a baby. Ye look just like dad, but y've got mum's eyes." Another person who knew his parents. Another piece of the puzzle. The name, Harry Potter, was like a stone dropped in a pond, the ripples spreading outwards, touching everyone he met. He followed Hagrid down a steep, narrow path, the weight of his name, the legacy of his parents, and the whispered warnings of his guardian all pressing down on him as the first years caught their first breathtaking glimpse of Hogwarts Castle, its twinkling windows reflecting in the black water of the lake. It was beautiful, ancient, and powerful. And Harry couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into the very heart of the storm. The great hall was a sea of floating candles and hushed whispers. Harry sat on the rickety stool, the ancient sorting hat descending over his eyes, plunging him into darkness. The whispers of the hall faded, replaced by a thin, ancient voice speaking directly into his mind. "Difficult. Very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind, either. There's talent, oh yes, and a thirst to prove yourself. But where to put you?" Harry's heart hammered. He thought of Snape, of the quiet discipline of Spinner's End, of the potions lab that was his whole world. He thought of the ambition his guardian had instilled in him, the drive to master himself, to be strong enough to survive. "Ah," the hat mused. "Ambition. Cunning. A certain disregard for the rules when they don't suit. You could do well in Slytherin. Greatness awaits you there, you know. It's all here, in your head." Slytherin. Snape's own house. A part of Harry, the part that had been forged in the shadows of Spinner's End, felt a pull towards it. It was familiar. It was survival. But then he heard another voice, Snape's voice, from years ago. "Your father was brave, in his own way." He thought of his mother, the kind, remarkable witch. He didn't know much about them, but he knew they hadn't been in Slytherin. They had been in Gryffindor. Not Slytherin. The hat said, a hint of surprise in its voice. "Are you sure? You could be great, you know. It's all here in your head, and Slytherin would help you on the way to greatness." Harry's thoughts screamed back. "Not Slytherin. Not Slytherin." "Well, if you're certain," the hat sighed. "Gryffindor." The last word was bellowed to the hall. Harry pulled the hat from his head, his vision swimming back into focus. The table draped in scarlet and gold erupted in cheers. He saw Ron, jumping up and down, clapping wildly. He saw Hermione, beaming at him from a few seats down. He slid off the stool and made his way to them, his legs unsteady. As he sat down, he felt a pair of eyes on him. He looked up to the staff table, high at the end of the hall. There, in the center, sat a man with a long silver beard and half-moon spectacles. Albus Dumbledore. The headmaster was watching him, his blue eyes twinkling with a knowledge that made Harry deeply uneasy. A few seats away, cloaked in black, sat Snape. His face was, as always, an unreadable mask. But for the briefest second, his dark eyes met Harry's. There was no smile, no overt sign of recognition, just a slight, almost imperceptible nod. It was enough. It was a tether, a reminder that he wasn't entirely alone. The feast was magnificent, but Harry barely tasted the food. His mind was a whirlwind. He was a Gryffindor. His parents were Gryffindors. He had chosen them, chosen a legacy he didn't fully understand, over the house of his guardian. Would Snape be disappointed? Angry? He risked another glance at the staff table, but Snape was now deep in conversation with a flustered-looking Professor Quirrell. Later, as the Gryffindors were led up endless moving staircases to their common room, Harry was shown to a circular room in a tower. A fire crackled invitingly, and squashy armchairs were scattered around. A portrait of a fat lady in a pink silk dress swung open to reveal their dormitory. He had a 4-poster bed with deep crimson hangings. His trunk was already at the foot of it. For the first time in his life, he had a room that wasn't under the shadow of Spinner's End. It felt strange. It felt like freedom. It also felt terrifyingly exposed. The first few weeks were a blur of new experiences. Lessons were a mixed bag. Transfiguration with Professor McGonagall was terrifyingly precise. Charms with Flitwick was cheerful and fun. Defense against the dark arts with Professor Quirrell was a disappointment. The man stuttered and smelled of garlic, and the whole class seemed to spend most of their time reading about dark creatures rather than learning to defend against them. But potions was different. From the moment they stepped into the dungeon classroom, the cold, clammy atmosphere was a stark contrast to the rest of the castle. And when Snape swept into the room, his black robes billowing, the chatter died instantly. "There will be no foolish wand-waving or silly incantations in this class," he began, his voice a silky whisper that carried to every corner of the dungeon. "As such, I don't expect many of you to appreciate the subtle science and exact art that is potion-making. However, for those select few who possess the predisposition, I can teach you how to bewitch the mind and ensnare the senses. I can tell you how to bottle fame, brew glory, and even put a stopper in death." His dark eyes swept the room, lingering for a fraction of a second on Harry Potter. He suddenly snapped. "What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" The class went silent. Ron, sitting next to Harry, looked at him with wide, pitying eyes. Hermione's hand shot up, waving frantically in the air. But Harry, meeting Snape's gaze calmly, didn't panic. This was a language he spoke. "The draft of living death, sir," he said, his voice clear and steady. A flicker of something, approval, perhaps, passed through Snape's eyes before it was gone. "HMPH. And where, Potter, would you look to find a bazaar?" The class was stunned. Snape hadn't even acknowledged Hermione's waving hand. Harry didn't hesitate. "In the stomach of a goat, sir. It's a stone that will cure most poisons." Snape's lips twitched. It wasn't a smile, but it was close. "Sit down, Potter. And pay attention. It seems you are not a complete dunderhead." He then turned to the rest of the class. "Why aren't you all taking notes?" The message was clear. Harry Potter was not to be trifled with in this class. Ron stared at him in amazement. "How did you know all that?" Harry shrugged, a small, private smile playing on his lips. "I read a lot. But the incident had consequences. It marked him. In the eyes of his classmates, he was no longer just the boy who lived, he was the boy who could stand up to Snape. Who seemed to know things. It created a distance, a quiet respect from some, and a simmering resentment from others. The resentment found its form in Draco Malfoy. A pale, pointed boy with a perpetual sneer, Malfoy had tried to befriend Harry on the very first day, extolling the virtues of pure blood supremacy and the flaws of boys like Ron Weasley. Harry, remembering every lesson Snape had ever taught him about judging people by their actions, not their blood, had coldly rebuffed him. Now, Malfoy saw him as a rival. He would whisper and point in the corridors, his two cronies, Crabbe and Goyle, looming behind him like idiot bodyguards. He would sneer, haughty, whenever Harry passed. Harry ignored him. Snape had taught him that engaging with fools only elevated them. But the hostility was a constant, low-grade thrum, a reminder that the world was not a friendly place. One afternoon, during a free period, Harry, Ron, and Hermione were in the library. Ron was struggling with his potions essay, while Hermione was, predictably, already writing 3 extra inches. Harry was reading ahead in his defense textbook, his mind only half on the words. "You know," Hermione said, looking up, her quill poised. "I've been reading about the Hogwarts founders. It's fascinating. Did you know Slytherin and Gryffindor were friends before they had their falling out? It was over whether or not to allow Muggle-borns to study here." "Sounds like Malfoy's ancestors," Ron muttered. Harry thought of Snape, a Slytherin, who had dedicated his life to protecting him, a Gryffindor. The lines weren't as clear as the house system made them out to be. The peace was shattered by a flustered-looking Neville Longbottom, who burst into the library, his face pale. "Harry, you have to come. Malfoy's got something. He's found out about Nicholas Flamel." Harry was on his feet instantly, his book forgotten. "What? Where?" "The trophy room. He says he knows what's guarding the, you know." Neville's eyes darted around nervously. The theft that had occurred at Gringotts on the very day Harry had visited Diagon Alley was common knowledge among the students, as was the fact that the mysterious package had been moved to Hogwarts. Harry, Ron, and Hermione hurried through the corridors. This was the thread that connected everything. The break-in at Gringotts, the whispered conversations Harry had glimpsed between Snape and Dumbledore, the way Snape's eyes followed Quirrell. Harry had a theory, a dark, unsettling suspicion, and he needed to confirm it. They found Malfoy in the trophy room, smirking. Well, if it isn't Potty and the Weasel. And Granger. Come to beg for information. Tell us what you know, Malfoy, Harry said, his voice quiet, but carrying a weight that made Malfoy's smirk falter for a second. Or what? Going to hex me, Potter. Everyone knows you're Snape's little favorite. He probably tells you all his secrets over cauldron-stirring nightcaps. Harry felt a hot flash of anger, but he controlled it. Snape's training held. I'm asking you once. What do you know about Nicholas Flamel? Malfoy's eyes gleamed with malicious pleasure. I know that Snape's after the stone. The Philosopher's Stone. It's what's hidden here. It can turn any metal to gold and produces the elixir of life. And Snape wants it for his old master. The words hung in the air, cold and damning. Harry's blood ran cold. His guardian. A thief. A servant of the Dark Lord. You're lying, Ron snarled. Am I? Why else would he be limping? He got past that three-headed dog, but it did some damage. And why else would he be asking Quirrell all those questions? He's trying to find out how to get past him. Harry's mind raced. Snape had been limping. He had been arguing with Quirrell. The pieces were falling into a horrifying picture. He thought of the nod in the Great Hall, the silent acknowledgement. Was it a warning? Or a threat? Without another word, he turned and walked away, his friends hurrying after him. His world, which had felt so newly stable, was tilting on its axis. The man who had raised him, who had protected him, who had taught him everything, was apparently plotting to steal a stone for the monster who had murdered his parents. The trust that had been the bedrock of his life was suddenly riddled with cracks, and through them, a terrible doubt was seeping in. He had to find out the truth. He had to confront him. But how do you confront the only father you've ever known with an accusation of treachery? Chapter 7. The Unforgivable Truth. The days that followed were a torment. Harry went through the motions of classes, but his mind was elsewhere, replaying every interaction with Snape, every sideways glance, every harsh word, searching for clues. He watched Snape more intently now, noticing the way his eyes would flick towards Quirrell during meals, the tense set of his shoulders whenever Dumbledore wasn't present. Ron and Hermione were convinced. Malfoy's story had the ring of ugly truth. It all fits, Ron said one evening in the common room, his voice low. Snape's always hated your dad, Harry. And he was a Death Eater. Everyone knows it. Dumbledore only trusts him because he says he's turned spy. But once a Death Eater, always a Death Eater. The words were a knife. They echoed the darkest fears Harry had tried to suppress for years. He knew Snape had been a Death Eater. It was one of the few concrete facts he knew about his guardian's past. Snape had never hidden it, not really. He had spoken of the dark arts with a clinical respect, had taught Harry to recognize their signs, had warned him of their seductive lure. He had always framed it as a lesson in survival. But now, Harry wondered if it was something else. Nostalgia. Regret for a lost cause. Harry's private theory, the one he clung to like a talisman, was that Snape was trying to protect the stone, not steal it. That the limp and the arguments with Quirrell were part of some secret mission from Dumbledore. But as the days passed and Snape's behavior grew more suspicious, frequent absences from the staff table, a new, sharper edge to his temper in class, even that theory began to fray. The breaking point came during their first Quidditch match. Harry, to his own astonishment, had been made the youngest seeker in a century. As he soared through the freezing air on his Nimbus 2000, the world narrowed to the snitch and the roar of the crowd. Then, his broom began to buck violently, trying to throw him off. He saw Hermione, in the stands, pointing her wand at Snape. She had set him on fire. She thought Snape was jinxing Harry. The moment his feet touched the ground, Harry didn't go to celebrate his victory. He had caught the snitch with his mouth, a fluke that was already the talk of the school. He stormed towards the castle, his heart a cold, hard knot of fury. He found Snape in a deserted corridor, brushing soot from his robes. You, Harry hissed, his voice shaking with a rage he had never felt before. You were trying to kill me. Snape looked at him, his face pale in the torchlight. Don't be absurd, Potter. If I wanted you dead, you would be. I was trying to counter-jinx your broom. Your friend's intervention made it considerably more difficult. Liar. Harry shouted, the word echoing off the stone walls. I know what you're after. The stone. You want it for you know who. My broom only started acting up when you were staring at me. Snape's expression didn't change, but something flickered deep in his eyes. Pain. You know nothing, Harry. You are a child, jumping to conclusions based on the gossip of other children. Go back to your dormitory before you say something you'll regret. Don't tell me what to do. Harry's control shattered. All the years of bottled-up questions, of silent obedience, of the fear of the world outside, erupted. You've lied to me my whole life. You told me you were protecting me, but you were just hiding me. You're one of them. You always have been. The words hung in the air, a poisonous cloud between them. Snape stood perfectly still, his face a mask of stone. But his eyes were a maelstrom of pain and something else. Grief. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a whisper so low, so intense, that Harry felt it in his bones. I have spent every day since you were placed on my doorstep trying to keep you alive. I have made sacrifices you cannot imagine, done things that haunt my sleep, all for you. For her. His voice cracked on the word. You want the truth, Harry. The unforgivable truth. Your mother, Lily, she was my best friend. The only person who ever saw anything good in a greasy-haired, miserable boy from Spinner's End. And she died because of a prophecy I overheard and relayed to the Dark Lord. I told him about the prophecy, and he marked you. He killed her because of me. The confession fell like a hammer blow. Harry staggered back, his mind reeling. This was worse than any accusation of treachery. This was guilt. Raw, corrosive, life-defining guilt. I don't expect your forgiveness, Snape continued, his voice hoarse. I don't deserve it. I have never asked for it. But I have dedicated my existence to ensuring that her sacrifice was not in vain. I do not want the stone for the Dark Lord. I am trying to protect it from him. And I am trying to protect you. That is the only truth that matters. He turned and walked away, his black robe swallowed by the shadows of the corridor. Harry stood there, frozen, the echo of Snape's confession ringing in his ears. The world had shifted again. His guardian wasn't a traitor. He was a man haunted by a mistake that had cost him everything. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold, hollow ache of understanding. He finally knew the truth. And it was far more terrible than any lie. Chapter 8, The Stone and the Mirror. The revelation in the corridor changed nothing, and yet it changed everything. Harry didn't speak to Snape for the rest of the term, and Snape made no attempt to approach him. They existed in a strained, silent truce, their eyes meeting only when absolutely necessary, a universe of unspoken words hanging between them. Harry threw himself into his own investigation. If Snape wasn't the threat, then someone else was. He watched Quirrell more closely now, noticing the tremor in his hands, the way his turban seemed to whisper when he walked past. It was Hagrid who inadvertently gave him the final piece of the puzzle. He let slip that the giant, three-headed dog, Fluffy, would fall asleep if you played him a bit of music. The night they decided to go for the stone was a blur of adrenaline and fear. Harry, Ron, and Hermione, armed with nothing but their wits and a handful of spells, descended through the trapdoor. They faced a monstrous devil's snare, a room full of flying keys, and a giant chessboard where Ron sacrificed himself to let Harry and Hermione proceed. Finally, only Harry remained. He pushed open the final door and found himself in a vast, torchlit chamber. In the center, on a pedestal, stood the mirror of Arised. He had stumbled upon it weeks ago, and in it, he had seen his parents, smiling, waving. A family. The image had filled him with a longing so deep it ached. And there, standing before the mirror, was Professor Quirrell. You, Harry breathed. Quirrell turned. He wasn't stuttering now. His voice was cold, clear, and full of menace. Me, Potter. I was wondering when I'd have the pleasure. But, Snape, Harry stammered. Snape. Quirrell laughed, a nasty, brittle sound. Yes, he does make a very convincing villain, doesn't he? All that black and brooding. He's been trying to protect you, you foolish boy. He's been setting himself up as a decoy, drawing attention away from the real threat. He pointed a finger at his own turban. From me. The voice that spoke next didn't come from Quirrell's mouth. It came from the back of his head. A high, cold, hissing voice that made Harry's scar sear with agonizing pain. Quirrell was always a fool. A useful one, but a fool nonetheless. The turban unraveled, and Harry found himself staring into a face that was not a face. It was the color of chalk, with slits for nostrils and gleaming red eyes. Lord Voldemort, attached to the back of Quirrell's head like a monstrous parasite. Harry Potter, the thing hissed. We meet again. Voldemort wanted the stone. He had been feeding on unicorn blood in the Forbidden Forest, sustaining his rudimentary body, waiting for this moment. He ordered Quirrell to get the stone from the mirror. But Quirrell couldn't see it. The mirror showed him winning a prize, giving it to his master, but not the stone itself. Harry stepped closer, drawn by a force he didn't understand. He looked into the mirror. He saw himself, but his reflection was different. It was reaching into its pocket. And when Harry's hand followed suit, he felt it. A smooth, heavy, blood-red stone. The Philosopher's Stone. It had appeared in his pocket. You see it? Voldemort hissed. Give it to me. No, Harry said, his voice surprisingly firm. He thought of Snape, of his confession, of the years of sacrifice. He thought of his parents, smiling at him from the mirror. He would not let their deaths be for nothing. Quirrell lunged for him. His hands, pale and trembling, closed around Harry's throat. And then, a miracle. Quirrell screamed. His hands blistered and burned where they touched Harry's skin. Smoke rose from them. Master, I cannot hold him. My hands. My hands. Harry, confused but acting on instinct, grabbed Quirrell's face. The man shrieked in agony, his skin sizzling and cracking. He crumbled to the floor, and as he did, a wisp of smoke, a shadow of a face, rose from his body and fled, howling, into the darkness. The pain in Harry's scar was so intense it blinded him. He fell to his knees, the world dissolving into a swirl of color and sound. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was the door bursting open and a pair of familiar black robes rushing towards him. He woke in the hospital wing, groggy and confused. The first face he saw was Dumbledore's, smiling gently. The second, hovering in the background, was Snape's. It was pale, drawn, and in his dark eyes, Harry saw a fear so profound it made his heart clench. It was the same look he had seen that night in his bedroom, years ago. The look of someone who had almost lost everything. Dumbledore explained. The stone was destroyed. Voldemort had escaped, but he was once again a wraith, powerless. And Harry's survival. It was because of his mother. Her love, her sacrifice, had left a mark on him. A protection so powerful that a being like Quirrell, filled with hatred and touched by Voldemort, could not endure his touch. Later, when Dumbledore had gone and Ron and Hermione had visited, crying with relief, Snape finally approached his bed. He stood there, looking down at him, his face unreadable. Harry looked up at him, his green eyes meeting the black. You were trying to protect me, he whispered. All this time, you were the decoy. Snape said nothing. He simply reached out and, with a gentleness that was startling, brushed a lock of hair from Harry's forehead, away from his scar. His hand lingered there for a moment, a silent caress. You are a foolish, reckless boy, he said, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. Just like your father. But there was no venom in the words. Only a grudging, painful admiration. And in that touch, in that simple gesture, the fracture between them began to heal. They weren't just guardian and ward anymore. They were something else. Survivors. Bound by a secret history, and by a love that neither of them knew how to voice. The first year at Hogwarts was over. The war, Harry now understood, had only just begun. The train ride back to King's Cross was a study in contrasts. Around him, students laughed and celebrated the end of term, trading chocolate frog cards and planning their summers. Harry sat by the window, watching the green English countryside blur past, his mind 1,000 miles away. Ron and Hermione were in the compartment, their voices a comfortable hum, but Harry found it hard to join in. He was going back to Spinner's End. Not as a hidden boy, a secret to be protected, but as himself. Harry. The title of boy who lived felt different now. He had faced Voldemort. He had seen the face behind the turban, heard the hissing voice, felt the searing pain in his scar. The monster was real, and he was out there, waiting. The platform was chaos when they arrived. Mrs. Weasley was there, enveloping Ron in a fierce hug, then turning to Harry with a warm smile. Harry, dear, Ron's told us so much. You must come stay with us this summer. Molly Weasley's cooking, that's what you need. Put some meat on those bones. Before Harry could respond, a familiar tall figure in black emerged from the crowd. Snape's presence seemed to part the sea of families, his dark eyes scanning until they found Harry. He gave Mrs. Weasley a curt nod. Weasley. Molly's smile faltered slightly, but she nodded back, her protective instincts clearly warring with politeness. Professor Snape. Taking Harry home, are you? Obviously. Snape's hand closed around Harry's shoulder, a brief, grounding pressure. Come, Potter. The car is waiting. Harry shot an apologetic look at Ron and Hermione. All right, he promised. The journey back to Cokeworth was silent, but it wasn't the hostile silence of before. It was a silence filled with things unsaid, a bridge still under construction. Harry watched the familiar, grimy streets of Spinner's End appear, and for the first time, he felt a strange sense of relief. This was home. This dingy, cramped, potion-scented house was where he belonged. Once inside, the routine reasserted itself with comforting familiarity. Snape busied himself in the lab, and Harry unpacked his trunk, placing his wand carefully on his bedside table. Ash, his owl, hooted softly from her perch, happy to be back in familiar surroundings. That evening, after a simple dinner, Snape called him into the front room. The fire was lit, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Snape sat in his armchair, a glass of fire whiskey untouched on the small table beside him. He gestured for Harry to sit on the worn sofa. There are things you need to know, Snape began, his voice low. About the prophecy. About why the Dark Lord marked you. Harry's heart quickened. He had been waiting for this. The prophecy you told him about. Snape flinched, but he didn't look away. Yes, I overheard only part of it. Sybil Trelawney made the prophecy to Dumbledore at the Hog's Head Inn. I was caught eavesdropping and thrown out before I heard the whole thing. But what I heard was enough. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month. Dies. Harry's mind raced. The 7th month dies, that's July. That's me. And Neville Longbottom. His birthday's in July too. Snape's eyes flickered with something like approval. Correct. The prophecy could have applied to 2 boys. The Dark Lord chose to believe it was you. He chose to mark you as his equal. And in doing so, he fulfilled the prophecy. The power he knows not, it was love. Your mother's sacrifice. That is the power that defeated him. But he's still out there, Harry said quietly. He'll try again. Yes. Snape's voice was hard. And you must be ready. Your training cannot stop at potions and basic defense. You need to learn more. Occlumency, to guard your mind from his influence. Advanced combat magic. The dark arts, so you can recognize and counter them. Harry nodded, a new determination settling in his bones. The summer wasn't a holiday. It was boot camp. The weeks that followed were the most intense of Harry's life. Snape pushed him harder than ever before. They woke before dawn for occlumency drills, Snape's legilimency pressing against Harry's mental walls until sweat beaded on his forehead and his head throbbed. Mornings were for potions, the complexity increasing exponentially. Afternoons were for dueling practice in the expanded front room, Harry learning to cast shields and offensive spells while moving, while distracted, while exhausted. You cannot afford to be predictable, Snape would snap as Harry's shield charm buckled under a particularly vicious jinx. A Death Eater will not wait for you to be ready. They will exploit every weakness. Your job is to have none. Harry absorbed it all. He learned to cast nonverbal spells, the incantation forming in his mind instead of on his lips. He learned to duel with his offhand, to fight in darkness, to brew counter potions in his mind while under pressure. His body grew leaner, stronger, his reflexes sharper. The boy who had entered Hogwarts was being honed into something harder, something more dangerous. But there were moments of respite. In the evenings, exhausted but satisfied, Harry would sit in the front room and read, or write letters to Ron and Hermione. Ron's letters were filled with Quidditch and complaints about his brothers. Hermione's were long, detailed accounts of the books she was reading and questions about Harry's training. He answered them vaguely, not wanting to worry them, but the distance between his world and theirs was growing. One evening, Harry found an old photograph in a drawer he was clearing out for Snape. It was a moving picture of 4 people. A young, pretty redhead who could only be his mother, a messy-haired boy who looked just like Harry, his father, a solemn, dark-haired boy with a hooked nose, staring at the ground, and another boy, stocky and friendly-looking, who was waving at the camera. He brought it to Snape. Is this? Snape took the photograph, his long fingers trembling slightly. He stared at it for a long moment, his face a battlefield of emotions. Yes, your mother, your father. He pointed to the solemn boy. Me. His finger moved to the waving boy. And Sirius Black. Harry had heard the name. He's the one who betrayed them. He's in Azkaban. Snape's jaw tightened. Yes, he was your father's best friend. And he sold them to the Dark Lord. He's a murderer, Harry. If you ever encounter him, you do not hesitate. You defend yourself. Do you understand? Harry nodded, but he looked at the photograph again, at the boy who was waving so happily. It was hard to reconcile that image with the traitorous killer he'd heard about. The world, he was learning, was full of shadows and half-truths. The summer ended too quickly. On the last night, Harry packed his trunk, his mind already shifting back to Hogwarts. He was looking forward to seeing Ron and Hermione, to the normalcy of classes and Quidditch. But he also knew he was returning as a different person. He was no longer just a student. He was a soldier in training. Snape appeared in his doorway. He held a small, velvet pouch. This is for you. Harry opened it. Inside was a heavy, silver signet ring, engraved with an intricate design he didn't recognize. What is it? It was your mother's. Her family signet. The Evans family. She gave it to me for safekeeping, before. He trailed off. I have held onto it long enough. It belongs with you now. Harry slipped the ring onto his finger. It was slightly too big, but it felt right. It felt like a connection. Thank you, sir. Snape gave a curt nod. Get some sleep. The train leaves early. He turned to go, but Harry's voice stopped him. Severus. Snape froze. Harry had never used his first name before. He turned slowly. Harry met his eyes. Thank you. For everything. For raising me. For protecting me. For telling me the truth. The silence stretched between them, thick with years of unspoken emotion. Snape's face worked, as if he was fighting a battle within himself. Finally, he spoke, his voice rough. You are the only good thing I have ever done, Harry. The only thing that makes any of it worthwhile. He left before Harry could respond, the door closing softly behind him. Harry sat on his bed, the ring warm against his finger, and felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. He was Harry Potter, son of Lily and James, ward of Severus Snape. He was loved, he was protected, and he was ready for whatever came next. Chapter 10. Whispers and Warnings. The second year at Hogwarts began with a disaster. Harry and Ron, unable to get through the barrier at King's Cross, had flown Ron's enchanted Ford Anglia to Hogwarts, crash-landing into the Whomping Willow. The car had thrown them out before speeding off into the Forbidden Forest, and they had narrowly escaped expulsion. The memory of that first week was still fresh, the Howler Misses. Weasley had sent Ron, the gleam in Malfoy's eyes as he watched them squirm, and the cold, disapproving silence from Snape, who had said nothing, but whose gaze had spoken volumes. Now, a few weeks into term, Harry sat in the Gryffindor common room, a fire crackling in the grate. Ron was beside him, attempting to finish a charms essay, while Hermione was buried in a massive book about medieval witch hunts. Harry's mind, however, was elsewhere. Something was wrong at Hogwarts. He could feel it. It had started with the whispers. Students were talking in hushed tones about voices in the walls, about hearing things in the corridors at night. Harry had heard them too. A cold, hissing voice, slithering through the stone. But when he mentioned it to Ron and Hermione, they looked at him strangely. Maybe it's just the pipes, mate, Ron had said, but his voice lacked conviction. Then came the attacks. Mrs. Norris, the caretaker's cat, was found petrified, hanging from a torch bracket, her message written on the wall in blood: the Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the heir, beware. The school was in an uproar. Dumbledore's eyes had lost their twinkle. Snape's face was a permanent thundercloud. And Harry. Harry was hearing the voice again. It was late one evening when he, Ron, and Hermione were walking back from the library. The corridors were empty, the only sound the flicker of torches. Then Harry heard it. A low, sibilant whisper, seeming to come from the walls themselves. Come to me, let me tear you, let me rip, let me kill. Harry stopped dead, his hand flying to his scar. There. Did you hear it? Ron and Hermione exchanged glances. Hear what, Harry? Hermione asked, carefully. The The hissing voice. It's saying it wants to kill. Ron looked pale. Harry, there's nothing there. Just the wind. But Harry knew what he had heard. And when they rounded the corner and found Justin Finch Fletchley, a Hufflepuff boy, lying petrified on the floor, his eyes wide and frozen in terror, Harry knew the voice was real. The suspicion fell on Harry almost immediately. Malfoy, with his usual sneer, had been only too happy to spread the rumor. Everyone knows Potter can talk to snakes, he said loudly in the corridors. Maybe he's the heir of Slytherin. The fact that Harry had, in fact, spoken Parseltongue during a dueling club incident, accidentally setting a snake on a boy, only fueled the fire. Students shrank from him in the corridors. Whispers followed him everywhere. Even some of the Gryffindors looked at him with unease. Harry retreated into himself. He spent more time in the library, trying to find information on the Chamber of Secrets, and more time in the potions classroom, seeking refuge in the familiar rhythms of brewing. Snape, to his surprise, didn't turn him away. One evening, Harry was alone in the dungeon classroom, crushing Beetle Eyes with more force than necessary, when the door opened and Snape swept in. Potter. It is past curfew. I know, sir. I needed to work. Snape regarded him for a long moment. Then, to Harry's astonishment, he walked to his stores and retrieved a small vial of a shimmering silver liquid. He set it on the bench before Harry. Essence of Murtlap. It will help with the tension in your hands. You are gripping the pestle as if you intend to murder it. Harry looked at the vial, then at Snape. You don't think I'm the heir, do you? Snape's expression didn't change, but his voice was quiet when he spoke. I think you are many things, Harry. Reckless, impulsive, infuriatingly curious, but a dark wizard. No, I have seen true darkness. You do not possess it. The words were a balm to Harry's wounded soul. Then who is it? Who's opening the chamber? Snape was silent for a moment. That is what I am trying to discover. Dumbledore has his suspicions, but proof is elusive. In the meantime, you must be careful. The whispers are dangerous. Not the ones in the walls, the ones in the corridors. They can destroy a reputation as effectively as any curse. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. And Harry, if you hear the voice again, do not follow it. Come to me, or to Dumbledore. Do not be a hero. The warning was timely. A few days later, Harry found a diary. It was tucked inside an old, moldy transfiguration book in a girl's bathroom that was always flooding. Moaning Myrtle, the ghost who haunted the toilets, had been particularly insistent that Harry take it. The diary was blank, but when Harry wrote in it, something extraordinary happened. The ink sank into the page and disappeared, and then words began to form in response. A conversation, with a boy named Tom Riddle, who claimed to be a memory from 50 years ago, preserved in the diary. Tom showed Harry the past. He showed him the last time the chamber had been opened, when a student had died. He showed him Hagrid, a large, clumsy boy, and a monstrous spider, Aragog. He showed him that Hagrid had been blamed, expelled, his wand snapped. Harry was reeling. Hagrid, the gentle, kind gamekeeper who had given him his first birthday cake. It couldn't be. But the memory was so vivid, so real. He showed the diary to Ron and Hermione. Hermione was fascinated, but cautious. It's incredibly advanced magic, Harry. To preserve a memory like this, to have it interact with the present, it's dark magic. Really dark. Ron was more pragmatic. It proves Hagrid was innocent. Someone else was the heir. We have to tell someone. But before they could, Hermione was attacked. They found her in the library, a book still open beside her, her body cold and stiff, a mirror clutched in her frozen hand. Petrified. Like the others, Harry's world crumbled. Hermione was his friend, his anchor, the voice of reason that balanced his recklessness and Ron's impulse. And now she was lying in the hospital wing, neither alive nor dead, trapped in a frozen nightmare. He sat by her bed that night, holding her cold, stiff hand. Ron was beside him, silent tears tracking down his cheeks. Harry made a vow, there and then. He would find the heir of Slytherin. He would stop them. And he would make them pay for what they had done to his friend. The diary was the key. He knew it. Tom Riddle had the answers. But as he pulled the diary from his pocket, a new page of writing had appeared. A single sentence, written in his own ink. I can help you. Meet me in the chamber. Harry's heart hammered. The chamber. Where it all began. Where the monster lived. It was insane. It was suicidal. But Hermione was lying frozen in a bed, and Harry was out of options. He looked at Ron, then at the diary. The game was changing. And Harry Potter, the boy who had been forged in shadows and trained in secrets, was about to walk into the heart of darkness. Chapter 11, Fangs of the Serpent. The plan was reckless. It was dangerous. It was exactly the kind of thing Snape had warned him against. But as Harry stood in Moaning Myrtle's flooded bathroom, the diary clutched in his hand, he knew there was no other choice. Hermione was petrified. The attacks were continuing, and the only one who could lead him to the chamber was a memory in a book. Ron was with him, his face pale but determined. "We should tell a teacher, Harry." "Dumbledore. Dumbledore's been suspended, remember?" Harry's voice was tight. Lucius Malfoy had seen to that, using his influence on the school governors. The headmaster was gone, and in his absence, the attacks had only increased. "We're on our own, Ron." Myrtle floated out of one of the toilet stalls, her ghostly form shimmering in the dim light. "Are you going to open it?" she asked, her voice echoing oddly. "I've seen them come and go. Students, I mean. A long time ago. They'd whisper things, flush themselves down, but no one ever opened it." "Opened what?" Ron asked. "The Chamber of Secrets, of course." Myrtle looked almost proud. "I died in here, you know. That's why I haunt the place." Such a nasty shock. Harry ignored her. He was staring at one of the sinks. On the side of a tap, barely visible, was a tiny, engraved snake. He approached it, his heart pounding. "Harry, what are you doing?" Ron whispered. "Opening it." He leaned close to the tap and hissed, the strange, sibilant sounds coming naturally to his tongue. "Open." The tap glowed with a white light and began to spin. The sink sank into the floor, revealing a dark, gaping hole. A rough, slimy pipe, large enough for a person to slide down, plunged into the unknown. "That," Ron said weakly, "is absolutely disgusting." Harry looked at his friend. "You don't have to come." Ron's face hardened. "Hermione's my friend too. And you're an idiot if you think I'm letting you go down there alone. Besides, someone has to keep you from doing something stupid." They jumped. The slide was long, dark, and foul. They tumbled out at the bottom into a dark tunnel, the air thick with the bones of small animals and the smell of decay. They lit their wands and pressed on, the passageway leading them deep under the school. Finally, they reached a wall. On it, two intertwined serpents, their eyes gleaming with emeralds. Harry knew what to do. He hissed again. "Open." The serpents parted, the wall split open, and they stepped into the Chamber of Secrets. It was vast, lined with towering stone pillars carved with serpents, their shadows dancing in the wandlight. At the far end, a massive statue of Salazar Slytherin loomed, his ancient stone face frozen in a stern expression. And at the foot of the statue, lay Ginny Weasley, Ron's sister. Small, pale, and still. "Ginny!" Ron shouted, rushing forward. But Harry held him back. "Wait, something's wrong." A figure emerged from the shadows. Tom Riddle. But not the transparent memory from the diary. He was solid, real, and smiling a cold, cruel smile. "Harry Potter," he said. "I was wondering when you'd arrive." "Tom," Harry breathed. "What have you done to Ginny?" "Ginny." Tom laughed. "Ginny has done this to herself. She poured her heart into my diary, her fears, her secrets. And I grew stronger. Strong enough to walk out of the pages. Strong enough to finish what I started 50 years ago." "You're Voldemort," Harry said, the name dropping like a stone into still water. Tom's smile widened. "That is a name I use now. But I was once Tom Riddle. And I am about to become so much more." He gestured, and from the shadows behind the statue, something stirred. A great, scaly head emerged. Eyes, yellow and slit-pupiled, fixed on Harry. The basilisk. The king of serpents. Its body was enormous, 100 feet of lethal muscle and scales, its fangs dripping with venom. "Meet my pet," Tom said. "She has been hungry." Ron grabbed Harry's arm. "Harry, we can't fight that." But Harry wasn't listening. Something was happening. A bird was singing. A phoenix song, beautiful and sad, echoing through the chamber. Fawkes, Dumbledore's phoenix, swooped down, dropping something at Harry's feet. The Sorting Hat. Then Fawkes soared towards the basilisk, his eyes glowing, blinding the great serpent with his tears. "Now, Harry!" a voice cried. It was Dumbledore's voice, carried by Fawkes. "Now!" Harry plunged his hand into the hat. He felt something hard, something smooth. He pulled it out. A sword. Silver, gleaming, with rubies set in the hilt. Godric Gryffindor's sword. The basilisk lunged, its great jaws open. Harry Dove rolled, and came up swinging. The sword bit into the serpent's flesh, but it wasn't enough. The creature was too fast, too strong. Its fangs raked through the air, and one of them sank into Harry's arm. The pain was immediate and excruciating. Venom, burning like fire, coursed through his veins. He fell to his knees, the sword clattering from his grasp. His vision blurred. He saw Tom Riddle, laughing. He saw Ron, pinned behind a pillar, helpless. He saw Ginny, still and pale. This was it. This was how it ended. But then, Fawkes landed beside him. The Phoenix wept, his tears falling onto the wound on Harry's arm. The burning stopped. The venom was healed. Harry looked up, strength flooding back into his limbs. He grabbed the sword. The basilisk struck again. Harry raised the sword and, with a scream of rage and defiance, drove it upwards with all his might, straight through the roof of the serpent's mouth. The basilisk shuddered, its body convulsing, and then collapsed, dead. Harry pulled the sword free and staggered to his feet. He turned to face Tom Riddle. The memory was fading, his form becoming transparent. "No!" Tom screamed. "This cannot be. I was so close." Harry grabbed the diary from the floor where it had fallen. He remembered what Hermione had said. Dark magic. Extremely dark. He remembered Snape's lessons. A basilisk fang. Its venom could destroy Horcruxes. That's what this was. A piece of Voldemort's soul. He grabbed one of the massive fangs from the dead basilisk's mouth and plunged it into the heart of the diary. A terrible, inhuman scream filled the chamber. Tom Riddle's form convulsed, shredded, and dissolved into nothing. The diary leaked black ink, then tore itself apart. Harry fell to his knees, exhausted. Fawkes sang his healing song. Ron rushed to Ginny, who was stirring, her eyes fluttering open. She looked around, confused, and then saw Harry, covered in blood and dust, a dead basilisk behind him. "Harry," she whispered. "What happened?" He managed a weak smile. "It's over, Ginny. It's finally over." Fawkes carried them out of the chamber, his song echoing in the darkness. When they emerged, they were in Dumbledore's office. The headmaster was there, his eyes twinkling, but behind him, standing rigid and pale, was Snape. He looked at Harry, at the blood, at the gaping hole in his sleeve where the fang had struck. For a moment, his mask slipped completely. Raw terror. Unfiltered relief. And then, it was gone. "You fool," Snape whispered, his voice shaking. "You absolute, reckless fool." But as Harry stumbled forward, Snape caught him. His arms, surprisingly strong, held him upright. And in that embrace, Harry felt the truth of it all. He was not alone. He had never been alone. He had a guardian, a family, and he had survived. Chapter 12. Echoes of the Past. The aftermath of the chamber was a blur of whispered conversations and quiet stares. Ginny was recovering in the hospital wing, her parents by her side, grateful beyond words. Hermione had been revived, the Mandrake restorative draft finally ready, and she had wept when she heard what Harry and Ron had done. Harry was a hero. Again. But the heroism felt hollow. The whispers had changed, now they were whispers of awe and admiration, but Harry still felt the weight of what he had learned. Tom Riddle. The diary. The piece of Voldemort's soul. It raised questions he couldn't answer. Snape found him in the astronomy tower 3 nights after the chamber. Harry was staring at the stars, his mind churning. "You should be in bed." Harry didn't turn. "I know." Snape stood beside him, his black robes blending with the night. For a long moment, they simply stood in silence, two figures against the vast, starlit sky. "Dumbledore told me about the diary," Snape said finally. "About what it was." "A Horcrux." Harry turned to him. "A piece of soul." "He split his soul. More than once." "Yes." Snape's voice was grim. "It is the darkest of magic. To create a Horcrux, you must commit murder. The act rips the soul apart. You then encase the fragment in an object. As long as the Horcrux exists, its creator cannot die." "How many?" Harry asked. "How many pieces did he make?" Snape shook his head. "I don't know. Neither does Dumbledore. But we must assume there are more. The diary was one. There will be others." Harry thought of the basilisk, of the venom burning through his veins, of the scream as the diary was destroyed. "We have to find them. Destroy them." "We?" Snape's eyebrow rose. You are 13 years old, Harry. This is not your war to fight alone. It became my war the night he killed my parents. Harry's voice was quiet, but fierce. It became my war when he tried to kill me. Twice now. I'm not standing on the sidelines. Snape looked at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. No, I suppose you're not. But you will not face it alone. Whatever Dumbledore's plans, whatever the future holds, you will not face it alone. Do you understand? Harry met his eyes. I understand. They stood together in the tower, guardian and ward, the echoes of the past whispering around them. The war was far from over. But for the first time, Harry felt like he had allies who would stand with him, not just behind him. The rest of the term passed quietly. The school healed. Dumbledore returned. Lucius Malfoy was dismissed from the Board of Governors after Dobby the house elf revealed his role in planting the diary on Ginny. Harry, to his surprise, received a special award for services to the school and a grudging respect from even the most skeptical students. But the nightmares continued. In them, he heard the hissing voice, saw the yellow eyes, felt the fangs sink into his flesh. He would wake in a cold sweat, his scar tingling, the echo of Voldemort's scream ringing in his ears. Snape noticed. He always noticed. He began brewing a mild dreamless sleep potion, leaving a small vial on Harry's bedside table each night with no explanation. Harry never thanked him aloud, but the potion helped. And the gesture meant more than any words could express. The train ride home was bittersweet. Harry sat with Ron and Hermione, watching the castle disappear from view. Hermione was already planning their summer study schedule. Ron was complaining about his brothers. And Harry. Harry was thinking about the future. What do you think third year will be like? Hermione asked. Dunno, Ron said. Hopefully less deadly. No giant snakes, no possessed teachers, just normal lessons. Harry smiled, but he knew better. With his life, normal was never an option. The echoes of the past were growing louder, and somewhere out there, Voldemort was waiting. Biding his time, gathering strength. But Harry was waiting too. And when the time came, he would be ready. Spinner's End was unchanged. The same grimy streets, the same cramped house, the same scent of potions and old books. Harry walked through the door and felt a strange sense of peace. This was home. This was where he was forged. That night, as he unpacked his trunk, he found the diary. Not the real one, that was destroyed. But a piece of parchment, tucked into his robes, with writing he didn't recognize. It was a single line, in a familiar, looping script. The snake's fangs are sharp, but the serpent's shadow is sharper still. Watch your back, Harry Potter. The game is far from over. He showed it to Snape, who examined it with a grim expression. It's a warning. From whom, I cannot say. But it confirms what we already suspected. There are those who watch, who wait. The Death Eaters are not gone. They are merely patient. Harry folded the parchment and tucked it into his pocket. He thought of the diary, of Tom Riddle's smiling face, of the basilisk's yellow eyes. He thought of his mother's ring on his finger, a talisman of protection. Let them watch. Let them wait. He would be ready. The summer stretched before him, full of training and potions and the quiet comfort of Spinner's End. But in the shadows, something stirred. The serpent's shadow was lengthening, and the next move in the game was already being made. The summer at Spinner's End was the longest Harry could remember. Not because it was dull, the training with Snape intensified, pushing him to new limits, but because the world outside seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The Daily Prophet arrived each morning, delivered by a grumpy-looking owl that had taken over the route from an increasingly unreliable Errol. Harry scanned the pages religiously, looking for news of Voldemort, of Death Eater activity, of anything. But the news was dominated by a different story. Sirius Black. The mass murderer had escaped from Azkaban. The articles were chilling. Black was dangerous. He was Voldemort's right-hand man, they said. He had betrayed the Potters and killed 13 people with a single curse. And now he was out there, somewhere, presumably coming to finish what he started. Harry read the stories with a strange, detached fascination. This was the man in the photograph. The one who had been waving so happily. The one who had been his father's best friend. How did someone go from that to this? Snape found him one evening, staring at the Prophet's front page. The photo showed Black, gaunt and wild-eyed, his hair a matted mess. It was a far cry from the smiling boy in the old picture. You're thinking about him. Harry looked up. He was my dad's friend. How could he do it? How could he betray them? Snape's face tightened. Greed. Fear. The promise of power. The Dark Lord was persuasive. He offered things that weak minds found irresistible. He paused, his dark eyes fixed on Harry. Black was never weak. That's what made his betrayal so profound. He chose darkness. He chose to sacrifice his friends for his own survival. Do you think he'll come after me? Snape was silent for a long moment. Yes, I think that is precisely what he will do. Which is why you will not leave this house without me. You will not open the door to strangers. And you will be vigilant. The warning hung in the air, heavy and real. Harry nodded, the weight of it settling on his shoulders. The training that summer was different. It was sharper, more urgent. Snape taught him offensive magic now, not just defense. Curses and hexes that could incapacitate, could wound, could kill if necessary. Harry learned them with a grim determination, hating the knowledge even as he absorbed it. The killing curse cannot be blocked, Snape said one afternoon, his voice flat. Only dodged. Or avoided entirely. If someone aims it at you, your only defense is to not be there. So I run. Intelligently. You use your environment. You create obstacles. You fight another day. Snape's eyes bored into his. There is no shame in survival, Harry. The dead cannot fight back. By August, Harry could cast a Patronus strong enough to fill the front room with silver light. He could duel Snape to a standstill for 5 minutes before being disarmed. He could brew a dozen different potions in his sleep. He was ready as any 13-year-old could be. The letter from Hogwarts arrived on a warm morning, carried by an owl Harry didn't recognize. It was accompanied by a second letter, this one in a cramped, familiar script. Harry, your third year begins with complications. The Ministry, in their infinite wisdom, has decided to station Dementors at the school entrances. Black's escape has panicked them. These creatures are dangerous. They feed on happiness, on hope, and they will affect you more than most because of what you carry. You will learn the Patronus charm formally this year. You already know it, but you will practice until it is second nature. Do not let them near you. Do not let them touch you. If you feel the despair closing in, cast. Immediately. Without thought. I will be at the station. SS. Harry folded the letter carefully, tucking it into his pocket next to his mother's ring. Dementors. He had read about them. Soul-sucking fiends that guarded Azkaban. And now they would be at Hogwarts. The train ride was tense. Ron and Hermione were both on edge, their usual chatter subdued. The compartment was quiet, filled with the uneasy anticipation of students returning to a school under siege. It happened just outside Hogsmeade. The train lurched, the lights flickered, and the temperature plummeted. Frost formed on the windows. Darkness seeped into the compartment, thick and suffocating. Harry felt it before he saw it. The cold, the despair, it wrapped around him like a shroud, squeezing the air from his lungs. He heard a scream, his mother's scream, and saw a flash of green light. He was falling into an abyss of memory and grief. Then, a voice. His own, but stronger. Expecto Patronum. Silver light exploded from his wand, filling the compartment. The thing, the Dementor, recoiled, its hooded face turning away from the warmth. Harry's Patronus, the stag, charged, and the creature fled. The lights came back. The warmth returned. Ron and Hermione stared at him, their faces pale. Harry, Hermione whispered. That was a Patronus, Harry said, his voice shaking. Snape taught me. The compartment door slid open. A plump witch with graying hair stood there, her expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. Is everyone all right? I felt the Dementor. She looked at Harry, at his wand still raised, at the fading silver light. Her eyes widened. That was you. At your age. Harry nodded, not trusting his voice. The witch, he later learned she was Professor Lupin, the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, smiled. Impressive. Very impressive. You'll do well in my class, Mr. Potter. She left, and the compartment erupted. Ron was shouting, Hermione was firing questions, but Harry barely heard them. He was staring at the spot where the Dementor had been, his heart still pounding. They were here. They were real. And they had shown him his parents' deaths. Hogwarts was different that year. The Dementors patrolled the entrances, their presence a constant, chilling reminder of the danger outside. Students hurried between classes, their heads down, their laughter muted. The castle, once a place of wonder, felt like a fortress under siege. Harry threw himself into his studies with a ferocity that surprised even Hermione. He attended every extra lesson Lupin offered, honing his Patronus until it was rock solid. He spent hours in the library, researching Dementors, researching Black, researching anything that might give him an edge. And then, he found the Marauder's map. It happened by accident. He was in Filch's office, serving a detention for being out after curfew. Malfoy's fault, as usual, when he noticed a drawer in Filch's desk. It was labeled confiscated and highly dangerous. Curiosity, that old, familiar impulse, got the better of him. Inside, beneath a collection of nasty-looking objects, was a folded piece of parchment. It was blank, utterly blank, but Harry felt the magic in it. He knew the words without knowing how he knew them. I solemnly swear that I am up to no good. The parchment bloomed with ink. A map of Hogwarts appeared, every corridor, every secret passage, every room. In moving across it, tiny dots with names, were the people in the castle. Students, teachers, Filch, Peeves, and in the staff room, 2 names. Remus Lupin, and, in a corner, pacing, Severus Snape. Ron, who was with him, gasped. "Where did you get that?" "I found it," Harry breathed. This is incredible." A final inscription appeared at the bottom. Messrs. Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs are proud to present the Marauder's map. Harry stared at the names. Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, Prongs. They meant nothing to him. But the magic, the cleverness, the sheer audacity of the map, it spoke to something in him. A connection to the past he couldn't explain. He showed it to Lupin during their next lesson. The professor's reaction was startling. He went pale, then red, then pale again. He stared at the map for a long, silent moment, his hands trembling. "Where did you get this, Harry?" Harry told him. Lupin listened, his expression unreadable. When Harry finished, Lupin sighed, a long, weary sound. "This belonged to some very clever students," he said quietly. "Friends of mine, a long time ago. They would have been pleased that you found it." "Friends?" Harry asked. "Who were they?" Lupin looked at him, his eyes sad. "They were your father's best friends. James Potter, Sirius Black, Peter Pettigrew, and me." The world tilted. Sirius Black, the mass murderer. He had been one of the map's creators. He had been Lupin's friend. Harry's father's friend. "Black," Harry whispered. "He helped make this." "Yes." Lupin's voice was pained. "He was a different person then, Harry. We all were. The war changed us. It changed everything." Harry looked at the map, at the names of the 4 friends, and felt a profound sense of loss. His father had been one of them. He had had friends, adventures, a life. And then it was all taken away. By Voldemort. By betrayal. By war. He didn't tell Snape about the map. He didn't know why, exactly. Perhaps because it felt private, a connection to his father that Snape, with his complicated history, couldn't share. Perhaps because he sensed that Snape's reaction would be volatile. The secret weighed on him, but the map was too useful to abandon. He used it to avoid encounters with Filch, to find empty rooms for practice, to navigate the castle's ever-changing staircases. It became his most prized possession, a window into the world his father had known. But the map also showed him things he didn't want to see. Late one night, unable to sleep, he pulled it out and watched the tiny dots move through the castle. Most were in their dormitories, a cluster of names in each house's common room. But one dot was moving alone. In a corridor near the entrance to the Gryffindor common room. Sirius Black. Harry's blood ran cold. Black was in the castle. He was here, right now, walking through the corridors. Harry grabbed his wand, his heart pounding. He had to warn someone. He had to. The dot vanished. Harry stared at the map, his mind racing. Where had he gone? How had he disappeared? He searched every inch of the map, but Black was gone. Vanished into thin air. The next morning, the news spread like wildfire. Sirius Black had broken into the castle. He had been seen by the fat lady, who guarded the Gryffindor common room. He had tried to get in. He had failed, but he had been there. Dumbledore ordered everyone to the Great Hall, where they slept on the cold stone floor, huddled together for warmth and safety. Harry lay awake, staring at the enchanted ceiling, the map hidden beneath his pillow. He knew something the others didn't. Black hadn't just tried to get in. He had been in. And he had vanished. What did he want? Why Gryffindor? Why now? The questions haunted him. But one thing was certain. Sirius Black was not just a name in the papers anymore. He was real, he was here, and he was after something. Or someone. Harry's hand drifted to his scar. He thought of the prophecy, of the Dark Lord's obsession. He thought of his mother's ring, warm against his skin. And he wondered, with a chill that had nothing to do with the cold stone floor, if Sirius Black had come for him. Chapter 14. The Grim. The days after Black's intrusion were a blur of fear and suspicion. Students jumped at shadows. Teachers patrolled the corridors in pairs. The Dementors multiplied, their hooded forms lurking at every entrance, their presence a constant, draining weight on the castle's spirit. Harry threw himself into Quidditch. The tryouts for the Gryffindor team were approaching, and he needed the release. Flying was the one thing that cleared his mind, that pushed back the darkness. The wind in his hair, the roar of the crowd, the simple focus of searching for the snitch, it was freedom. But even on the pitch, he couldn't escape. During one practice, a storm rolled in, dark and sudden. The team headed for the changing rooms, but Harry lingered, drawn by something he couldn't name. The wind howled. The rain lashed. And then he saw it. A massive, black dog. It was sitting in the stands, watching him. Its eyes were intelligent, knowing, and utterly terrifying. Harry's scar prickled. His heart hammered. The dog, the grim, his mind supplied, the omen of death, simply stared, then turned and vanished into the shadows. He told Ron and Hermione. They were skeptical, then worried. Hermione suggested it was just a stray dog. Ron, whose familiarity with the superstitions of the wizarding world was more extensive, looked pale. A grim, Harry. Are you sure? My mum says seeing a grim is the worst kind of omen. It means you're going to die. Harry didn't need to hear that. The image of the dog haunted him, appearing in his nightmares, lurking at the edge of his vision. He started seeing it everywhere. In the corridors, in the grounds, watching, always watching. The tension came to a head during the Hogsmeade visit. Harry, lacking permission, used the Marauder's map to sneak into the village via one of the secret passages. He met Ron and Hermione at the Three Broomsticks, and for a few hours, he almost forgot the fear. Almost. But as they were leaving, they overheard a conversation. Professor McGonagall, Professor Flitwick, and the barmaid, Rosmerta, were talking. Talking about Sirius Black. Talking about the Potters. Harry listened, frozen, as the story unfolded. Sirius Black had been the Potter's secret keeper. The one trusted to hide them from Voldemort. And he had betrayed them. He had told Voldemort where they were. And then, when confronted by another friend, Peter Pettigrew, he had killed him and 12 muggles with a single curse. The pieces clicked into place. The photograph. The smiling boy. The gaunt, wild-eyed murderer. This was the man who had destroyed his family. This was the reason he had grown up in the shadows of Spinner's End, hidden and afraid. Harry's vision blurred with rage. He wanted to find Black. He wanted to make him pay. He wanted a hand on his arm. Hermione's face, pale and frightened. Harry, you're shaking. Let's go back. He let her lead him away, but the rage didn't fade. It burned, hot and constant, fueling his training, his dueling, his every waking moment. Snape noticed. Of course he noticed. Your form is sloppy, he said one evening, after Harry had failed to block a simple jinx. Your mind is elsewhere. What's wrong? Harry told him. About the conversation, about Black, about everything. Snape listened, his face a mask of stone. When Harry finished, Snape was silent for a long moment. Black's betrayal cost your mother her life, he said finally, his voice low and cold. It cost me everything. If you encounter him, do not hesitate. Do not try to be a hero. Destroy him. The words were harsh, but they matched the fire in Harry's heart. He nodded, a new determination settling in his bones. The confrontation came sooner than expected. Harry, Ron, and Hermione were walking back from Hagrid's hut when the dog appeared again. It lunged at Ron, dragging him into a hidden passage beneath the Whomping Willow. Harry and Hermione, without hesitation, followed. The passage led to the Shrieking Shack, the most haunted place in Britain. But the ghosts, Harry knew now, were a lie. The shack was empty, dusty, and utterly silent. And at the top of the stairs, they found Ron, pale but alive, and a man. Sirius Black. He was gaunt, his hair matted, his eyes wild. But there was something in those eyes that Harry hadn't expected. Not malice. Not triumph. Grief. Raw, overwhelming grief. You look so like him, Black whispered, staring at Harry. Like James. Except your eyes. You have your mother's eyes. The rage surged. Harry raised his wand. You betrayed them. You killed them. No. The voice came from behind them. Professor Lupin, entering the room, his face pale but determined. He didn't. Peter Pettigrew was the secret keeper. Peter betrayed them. Sirius was framed. The story that followed was impossible. Peter Pettigrew, the supposed dead hero, was alive. He had cut off his own finger, faked his death, and hidden as a rat. As Ron's rat. Scabbers. Harry stared at the sleeping rat in Ron's pocket. The pieces fell into place with a sickening click. Pettigrew had been there all along. Listening. Waiting. Reporting to Voldemort. But if Black was innocent, then everything Harry had believed was wrong. The man who had haunted his nightmares was not a villain. He was his father's best friend. He was. Your godfather, Black said, his voice cracking. James and Lily named me your godfather. If anything happened to them, I was to take care of you. And I failed. I failed you. I failed them. Godfather. The word echoed in Harry's mind. He had a godfather. Someone who was family. Someone who wanted him. The moment shattered as the door burst open. Snape stood there, his wand raised, his face contorted with fury. He had followed them, had heard the story, but his hatred for Black blinded him to everything else. Expelliarmus. Harry shouted, disarming Snape before he could attack. He's innocent. Pettigrew did it. He's the one. The chaos that followed was a blur. Pettigrew transformed, escaping into the night. Lupin transformed into a werewolf, the full moon rising, and Black shifted into his dog form to protect them. In the confusion, Pettigrew vanished. Harry woke in the hospital wing, his body aching, his mind reeling. The first face he saw was Dumbledore's, calm and kind. The second was Snape's, pale and drawn, standing in the corner like a shadow. Sirius Black is innocent, Dumbledore said quietly. But proving it will be difficult. Pettigrew is gone, and without him, Black remains a fugitive. Harry's heart sank. He had found a godfather, only to lose him again. But that night, as the hospital wing grew quiet, a dog's head appeared at the window. Sirius, in his animagus form, had come to say goodbye. He pressed his nose against the glass, his eyes full of a promise. I'll be watching, the look seemed to say. I'll be waiting. When the time comes, I'll be there. Harry watched him disappear into the night, a strange mixture of loss and hope filling his chest. He had a godfather. He had family. And someday, somehow, they would be together. Snape appeared at his bedside, his expression unreadable. You defended him. He's innocent. Perhaps. Snape's voice was tight. But he is also reckless. Dangerous. He will bring chaos to your life, Harry. Be careful. Harry looked at him, at the man who had raised him, protected him, loved him in his own silent way. You're still my family, he said quietly. Nothing changes that. Something flickered in Snape's eyes. Pain, gratitude, a love he couldn't voice. He reached out, his long fingers brushing Harry's hair back from his scar. Then, without a word, he turned and left. The third year was over. Harry had faced Dementors, discovered a godfather, and learned the truth about his parents' betrayal. The world was more complicated than he had ever imagined. But one thing was certain. He was not alone. He had never been alone. And whatever came next, he would face it with the people who loved him by his side. Chapter 15. The Dark Mark. The summer before fourth year was the strangest of Harry's life. For the first time, he wasn't confined to Spinner's End. Sirius, in his dog form, would appear at odd hours, lurking in the shadows of the grimy streets, a silent guardian. They couldn't speak, it was too dangerous, but his presence was a comfort. Harry wrote to him constantly, long letters filled with questions about his parents, about their time at Hogwarts, about everything. Sirius wrote back in short, hurried notes, delivered by a scruffy-looking owl that seemed to enjoy dive-bombing Snape's windows. The notes painted a picture of his father that was both familiar and strange. James Potter had been brilliant, popular, and occasionally arrogant. He had loved Quidditch, loved pranks, loved his friends. He had also, according to Sirius, grown up. The war had matured him, had shown him what really mattered. He would have been so proud of you, Sirius wrote in one letter. Not because you're the boy who lived. Because you're you. Brave, loyal, Good. Harry treasured those words. They were a connection to a past he had never known. But the summer was also marked by a growing tension. The Quidditch World Cup was approaching, and the excitement was palpable. Even Snape, who professed to find the sport a tedious exercise in unnecessary risk, seemed mildly interested. Harry suspected it was less about the game and more about the opportunity to observe the Wizarding world's reaction to the tournament's announcement. The Triwizard Tournament. Harry had read about it in Hogwarts, a history. It had been discontinued for centuries due to the death toll. Now, it was being revived, and Hogwarts was hosting it. The night of the World Cup was magical. Harry went with the Weasleys, Hermione, and a surprisingly tolerant Snape, who had been persuaded to accompany them as an extra chaperone. The game was spectacular, Ireland vs. Bulgaria, with Krumm's legendary Wronski feint, and for a few hours, Harry forgot about Voldemort, about prophecies, about everything. Then came the darkness. After the match, chaos erupted. Masked figures, Death Eaters, were rampaging through the campsite, levitating muggles, setting fires, terrorizing everyone. Harry, separated from the others, saw it all. The terror in the muggles' eyes. The glee on the masked faces. And above it all, a sign. The dark mark. It hung in the sky, green and terrible, a skull with a serpent for a tongue. The symbol of Voldemort. The symbol of terror. Harry's scar burned with an intensity that dropped him to his knees. When he woke, he was in a tent, surrounded by worried faces. Snape was there, his expression grim. Mr. Weasley was pacing, and the ministry officials were asking questions. The next few weeks were a blur of investigations and accusations. Someone had conjured the mark. Someone was signaling that the Dark Lord's followers were active again. The mood at Hogwarts was tense as the new term began. But the tension was quickly overshadowed by the arrival of the other schools. The students from Beauxbatons, with their elegant manners and enormous headmistress. And the students from Durmstrang, with their rough demeanor and their famous headmaster, Igor Karkaroff. Harry watched them arrive, feeling a strange sense of foreboding. The tournament was supposed to be a celebration, a chance for unity. But all he could feel was the shadow of the dark mark, still hanging over everything. The goblet of fire was placed in the entrance hall. The age line was drawn. And the names were to be chosen on Halloween. Harry didn't put his name in. He had no desire to compete in a tournament that had killed people. He was content to watch, to cheer for Cedric Diggory, the Hogwarts champion. But on Halloween night, when the goblet spat out the fourth name, Harry's world turned upside down. Harry Potter. The silence was absolute. Every eye in the Great Hall turned to him. He stood frozen, his mind blank with shock. He hadn't done it. He hadn't put his name in. But here he was, the fourth champion, the impossible third competitor from Hogwarts. The accusations came immediately. Ron, his face twisted with betrayal, turned away. You told me you didn't put your name in. You lied. I didn't. Harry shouted, but Ron was already storming out. The other champions stared at him with a mixture of suspicion and hostility. The Durmstrang students muttered darkly. The Beauxbatons students looked scandalized. And the Hogwarts students, his own housemates, looked at him as if he were a stranger. Snape appeared at his side, his hand gripping Harry's arm with surprising force. Come with me. Now. He led Harry through the crowd, past Dumbledore's concerned gaze, past Karkaroff's suspicious sneer, into a small, empty classroom. He closed the door and turned to face Harry, his expression unreadable. Tell me the truth. Did you put your name in that goblet? No. Harry's voice cracked with frustration. I swear, I didn't. Someone else did. Someone wants me in this tournament. Snape studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. I believe you. The question is, who would do this? And why? Harry thought of the dark mark, hanging in the sky. He thought of the whispers of Death Eaters, regrouping, waiting. He thought of Voldemort, out there somewhere, biding his time. Maybe it's connected, he said quietly. The mark. The tournament. Maybe they're planning something. Snape's face hardened. Then we must be ready. You must be ready. This tournament is dangerous, Harry. The tasks are designed to test champions to their limits. If someone is manipulating the selection, they intend for you to face those dangers. I know. Harry met his guardian's eyes. I'll be ready. I've been training my whole life. A ghost of a smile flickered across Snape's face. Yes, you have. He paused, then added, more quietly, your mother would be proud. Your father too. But they would also be terrified. As am I. The admission hung in the air, raw and unexpected. Harry felt a lump form in his throat. I'll be careful. I promise. Snape nodded curtly, then turned and left, his robes billowing behind him. Harry stood alone in the empty classroom, the weight of the tournament settling on his shoulders. He was the youngest champion. He was the target of a conspiracy. And somewhere out there, in the shadows, Voldemort was waiting. The game was changing. And Harry Potter, the boy forged in the darkness of Spinner's End, was about to be tested as never before. Chapter 16. The Triwizard Tournament. The weeks following the champion selection were the hardest of Harry's life. Ron's silence was a constant, aching wound. His other friends, Hermione, the Weasleys, even Neville, rallied around him, but Ron's absence left a hole that nothing could fill. The other champions treated him with a mixture of disdain and suspicion. Fleur Delacour looked at him as if he were an amusing but insignificant child. Victor Crumb, though polite, clearly saw him as an interloper. And Cedric Diggory, the Hogwarts champion everyone had wanted, was gracious but distant. Harry threw himself into preparation. Snape, despite his disdain for the tournament, became an unexpected ally. He brewed potions for endurance, for focus, for healing. He drilled Harry on defensive strategies, on environmental awareness, on the kinds of magical creatures that might appear in the tasks. The first task is always about dragons, Snape said one evening, in the privacy of his office. It's traditional. You will have to get past a dragon to reach whatever prize they've set. Dragons, Harry repeated flatly. Of course, dragons. I cannot help you directly during the task. But I can prepare you. You know how to create shields. You know how to move, how to dodge. You have the skills. Now you need the nerve. Harry thought of the Hungarian horntail, the most dangerous of the breeds. He thought of its tail, spiked and lethal, its fire, hot enough to melt stone. He thought of the other champions, older, stronger, more experienced. And he thought of Voldemort, waiting in the shadows. This was nothing. This was a game compared to what was coming. The morning of the first task, Harry was calm. The tent where the champions waited was filled with tension, but he sat apart, his eyes closed, breathing deeply. He could hear the roar of the crowd, the distant shriek of the dragons. He could feel his heart beating, steady and strong. When his name was called, he walked out into the arena. The horntail was there, guarding its golden egg, its yellow eyes fixed on him. The crowd fell silent. Harry raised his wand. He thought of the training, the years of discipline. He thought of Snape's voice, calm and precise. He thought of his mother's ring, warm against his skin. Accio Firebolt. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. The dragon shifted, its tail twitching. The crowd held its breath. Then, a speck in the distance. Growing larger. His broom. His beautiful, familiar broom. It slammed into his hand, and he was airborne. The next few minutes were a blur of fire and speed. The dragon lunged, snapped, breathed flames that singed his heels. Harry flew like he had never flown before, dodging, weaving, drawing the creature away from its nest. Then, a dive, a grab. The egg was in his hands, and he was soaring upwards, the crowd erupting in cheers. He had done it. He was through. The other champions performed well. Fleur used a sleeping charm that only half worked, singeing her skirt but retrieving her egg. Crumb attacked his dragon directly, losing a few eggs but succeeding. And Cedric, the golden boy, transfigured a rock into a Labrador and distracted his dragon long enough to snatch the egg. But Harry's time was the best. He was in first place. The celebration that night was muted. Ron was still silent, still avoiding him. But Hermione was there, beaming. The Weasley twins were there, congratulating him loudly. And Snape, standing in the shadows of the entrance hall, gave him a single, curt nod. It was enough. The egg, when he opened it, screamed. A horrible, wailing shriek that made his ears ring. He showed it to Hermione, who was baffled. They tried everything, water, fire, even tickling it, but nothing worked. It was Cedric who helped him, though the help came with a price. He told Harry to take the egg to the prefect's bathroom and soak it. Harry did, and underwater, the screaming transformed. It became a song. A haunting, beautiful melody about mermaids and lost things and taking what you most treasure. The second task. Something you would miss. Something precious. Underwater. Harry thought of Ron, their friendship, broken and silent. He thought of Hermione, his anchor. He thought of Snape, his guardian. He thought of Sirius, his godfather, waiting in the shadows. He had so much to lose. The task came, and Harry was ready. He used gillyweed, growing gills and webbed feet, and plunged into the Black Lake. The underwater world was beautiful and terrifying. He faced Grindylows, navigated the murky depths, and finally found the hostages. Fleur's sister, Cho Chang, Ron, his best friend, held captive, asleep, waiting to be saved. Harry cut him free and swam for the surface, the Grindylows snapping at his heels. He broke through the water, gasping, Ron in his arms, and the crowd roared. He came in first again, tied with Cedric for the win. But the real victory was Ron's eyes, opening, focusing, and the words that followed. Harry, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was a git. A complete git. Harry grinned, water streaming down his face. Yeah, you were. Now help me out of here. The friendship was mended. The team was whole again. But as Harry stood on the platform, accepting his accolades, he saw something that chilled him. In the stands, watching him with an intensity that was almost physical, was Barty Crouch. Not the real Barty Crouch, Harry knew now, but someone else. Someone wearing his face. Mad-Eye Moody, the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, was watching him with a strange, knowing smile. And in that moment, Harry understood. The conspiracy was still there. The danger was still present. The tournament was just a game, a distraction from the real threat. And whoever had put his name in the goblet was still watching, still waiting, still planning. The second task was over. But the war, the real war, was just beginning. Chapter 17, The Pensieve. The days after the second task brought a strange calm. Harry trained, studied, and spent time with his friends, but the unease never left him. Moody's constant attention was unnerving. The man seemed to know things he shouldn't, to watch Harry with an almost possessive intensity. Then came the vision. Harry was in divination class, a subject he despised, when it happened. The room spun. He was somewhere else. An old house, dark and cold. A man, weak and terrified, pleading for mercy. A voice, high and cold, saying, "Kill despair." And then, green light. He woke on the floor, his scar screaming, Trelawney's panicked face above him. Harry, what happened? What did you see? He couldn't tell her. He could barely think. Voldemort had killed someone. He had felt it. He had seen it. He told Dumbledore, who listened with a grave expression. The headmaster asked questions, probed for details, and then sent Harry to the hospital wing with a vial of dreamless sleep potion. The next day, the news came. The ministry official, Bertha Jerkins, had been missing for months. Now they feared the worst. Harry knew the worst had happened. He had seen it. The third task loomed, a maze filled with magical creatures and enchantments. The champions would race to reach the Triwizard Cup at the center. Harry trained harder than ever, but his mind was elsewhere. Voldemort was growing stronger. He was planning something. And Harry was trapped in a tournament he never asked for. The night before the final task, Snape called him to his office. The room was dim, lit only by flickering candles. Snape sat behind his desk, his face pale and drawn. "There is something you need to see," he said quietly. "Something I should have shown you years ago." He led Harry to his pensieve, a shallow stone basin filled with a silvery substance. "Memories. You will see things that may be painful," Snape warned. "But you need to understand. You need to know who your mother was. Who I was." Harry leaned forward, and the world dissolved. He was in a playground. A small, red-haired girl was laughing, making a flower bloom in her palm. A boy, skinny and dark-haired, watched from the shadows, his eyes full of longing. Lily. And Snape. As children, he watched their friendship grow, watched Snape teach her about magic, watched her defend him from bullies. He saw the darkness creeping in, Snape's fascination with the dark arts, his friendship with future Death Eaters, the word that destroyed everything. Mudblood. Lily's face, hurt and furious. Snape's face, ashamed and defiant. The friendship, shattered. Then, later, a older Snape, desperate, begging Dumbledore to save her. The prophecy. The betrayal. The guilt that would define his life. Harry emerged from the pensieve, tears streaming down his face. He looked at Snape, really looked at him, and saw the boy in the memory. The lonely, brilliant boy who had loved his mother and lost everything. You loved her, Harry whispered. With everything I had. Snape's voice was hoarse. In my foolishness, my arrogance, cost her her life. I have spent every day since trying to atone. Harry didn't know what to say. The man who had raised him, who had protected him, who had taught him everything, was driven by a love so profound it had shaped his entire existence. I'm sorry, Harry said. For what you went through. For what you lost. Snape looked at him, his dark eyes glistening. You are not a replacement for her, Harry. You never were. But you are the reason I kept living. The reason I kept fighting. You are my redemption. The words hung in the air, heavy and true. Harry crossed the room and, for the first time in his life, hugged his guardian. Snape stiffened, then slowly, awkwardly, his arms came up and held him. They stood like that for a long moment, two broken souls holding each other together. When they finally pulled apart, something had shifted. The walls between them were gone. They were father and son, in every way that mattered. Tomorrow, Snape said quietly, you will face the maze. Be careful. Moody is not what he seems. I have suspicions, but no proof. Trust no one. And if something feels wrong, get out. The cup is not worth your life. Harry nodded. I will. I promise. The next evening, the maze loomed before him, dark and foreboding. The champions entered one by one. Harry moved cautiously, his wand raised, his senses alert. The hedges whispered. Creatures skittered in the darkness. He faced a blast-ended Scroot, a sphinx with a riddle, and the creeping sense that something was very, very wrong. He found Cedric. Together, they reached the cup. It was a tie. They could take it together. We'll touch it at the same time, Cedric said. On 3. 1, 2, 3. The cup was a portkey. The world squeezed, and they were flying through darkness, slamming into hard ground. Graveyard. Cold. Dark. A voice. Kill the spare. Green light. Cedric fell. Harry turned, and there he was. Voldemort. Reborn. His body, horrible and new, his face, pale and serpentine, his eyes, red and triumphant. Harry Potter, he hissed. We meet again. The Death Eaters appeared, surrounding them, their masks gleaming in the moonlight. Voldemort monologued, taunted, tortured. And then he released Harry, gave him a chance to fight. A duel. Harry against Voldemort. Their wands connected, golden light, echoes of the past. The spirits of his parents appeared, Cedric among them, urging him to run. Take my body back, Cedric's ghost said. Take me home. Harry grabbed the cup. The world squeezed. And he was back at Hogwarts, screaming, Cedric's body beside him, the truth spilling from his lips. Voldemort was back. Cedric was dead. And the world would never be the same. Chapter 18. The Return. The aftermath was chaos. Cries of denial. Accusations of lies. The Ministry, led by Cornelius Fudge, refused to believe. Dumbledore tried to convince them, but Fudge's fear was stronger than his reason. He left, taking disbelief and denial with him. Harry sat in Dumbledore's office, numb. Snape stood behind him, a silent guardian. Dumbledore's face was grave. Voldemort has returned, the headmaster said quietly. And we must prepare. The Order of the Phoenix will be reinstated. We will fight. The Order? Harry asked. An organization dedicated to fighting the Dark Lord. Your parents were members. Sirius was a member. And Severus, as you know, has been a spy for us for years. Harry looked at Snape, who nodded grimly. Your role in this is not yet clear, Dumbledore continued. But the prophecy still stands. You and Voldemort are connected. The mark on your forehead, the visions you've had, these are signs. You must continue your training. You must be ready. The summer that followed was the darkest yet. Spinner's End became a fortress. Snape was gone often, meeting with the Order, gathering intelligence. Harry trained alone, pushing himself harder than ever, fueled by grief and rage. Cedric's death haunted him. The image of the green light, the thud of the body, played on repeat in his mind. He saw it in his dreams, in the shadows, in the flicker of candlelight. Sirius wrote often, his letters a lifeline. He was at Grimmauld Place. The Black family home, helping restore it as Order headquarters. He wanted Harry to come, to see him, but Dumbledore insisted Harry stay hidden. Voldemort will seek you, Dumbledore wrote. You must remain protected. The protection felt like a cage. Harry chafed against it, desperate to act, to fight, to do something. But Snape's words echoed in his mind. The dead cannot fight back. He stayed. He trained. He waited. The letter from the ministry came in July. He was expelled from Hogwarts. For using underage magic. For defending himself against Dementors sent to attack him and his cousin. The ministry's denial of Voldemort's return extended to persecuting the one person who knew the truth. Harry laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Expelled. After everything, they were throwing him out. But Dumbledore intervened. The hearing was a farce, but Harry was cleared. He could return to Hogwarts. But the warning was clear. The ministry was against him. The world was against him. The train ride to Hogwarts was tense. Ron and Hermione were with him, but the compartment felt empty. Other students stared, whispered. Harry Potter, the boy who cried Dark Lord. Harry Potter, the attention seeker. The new defense against the dark arts teacher was Dolores Umbridge. Toad-like, sweet-voiced, and utterly evil. She taught theory, not practice. She insisted there was no danger, that Dumbledore and Harry were liars. Her lessons were useless, her punishments brutal. Harry couldn't take it. He started Dumbledore's army. Secret meetings in the room of requirement, teaching his classmates real defense. It was dangerous, exhilarating, and exactly what he needed. The DA became his family. Neville, Luna, the Weasleys, Hermione, they learned together, grew together, fought together. Harry found purpose in teaching, in preparing them for the war he knew was coming. But Umbridge was watching. Her inquisitorial squad, led by Malfoy, was everywhere. The tension built, week by week, until it finally broke. Dobby warned them. The room had been discovered. They ran, but not fast enough. Harry was caught. Dumbledore took the blame, vanishing before the ministry could arrest him. And Umbridge was made headmistress. Hogwarts became a prison. The halls were patrolled by Umbridge's enforcers. Rules multiplied. Punishments escalated. And Harry, haunted by visions of Voldemort, felt the darkness closing in. Then came the vision that changed everything. He saw Sirius, trapped, tortured, in the Department of Mysteries. He had to go. He had to save him. The DA didn't hesitate. They followed him into danger, into the heart of the ministry. They faced Death Eaters, fought with everything they had. And in the end, they found the prophecy. The prophecy about Harry and Voldemort. But Sirius wasn't there. It was a trap. The battle was chaos. Spells flew. Friends fell. Harry chased Bellatrix Lestrange, the woman who had killed his parents' friends, who had tortured Neville's parents, who had just killed Sirius. No, not Sirius. Not dead. Not. But he was. Sirius fell through the veil, his eyes meeting Harry's for one final moment. A smile. And, nice one, James. And then he was gone. Harry's scream echoed through the chamber. He attacked Bellatrix with a fury he hadn't known he possessed. He would have killed her, would have used the Cruciatus curse, but he couldn't. He didn't have the hate. Not enough. Not yet. Voldemort appeared. Dumbledore appeared. The duel between them was epic, terrifying, a clash of titans. And then, the ministry arrived. Fudge saw. He had to believe. Voldemort was back. Harry was telling the truth. But it was too late. Sirius was dead. The one person who could have given Harry a family, a home, was gone. And Harry was left with nothing but grief and the weight of a prophecy he didn't fully understand. Dumbledore told him, finally. In his office, after everything. The prophecy. The connection. Harry and Voldemort, bound together, unable to live while the other survives. Either must die at the hand of the other, Dumbledore said quietly, for neither can live while the other survives. The words hung in the air, cold and final. Harry looked at the headmaster, at the grief in his ancient eyes, and felt something settle in his chest. Acceptance. Or resignation. He wasn't sure which. He had to die. Or Voldemort had to die. There was no other way. That night, he sat by the lake, staring at his reflection in the dark water. Snape found him there, standing in the shadows. You know, Snape said. It wasn't a question. Yes. They were silent for a long moment. Then Snape sat beside him, an unprecedented act. I made a vow to your mother, he said quietly. To protect you. I intend to keep it, prophecy or no. Prophecy says I have to die. Prophecies are tricky things. They show possibilities, not certainties. Dumbledore believes there is another way. I believe there is another way. You must believe it too. Harry looked at him. Why? Why do you still fight? After everything. Snape met his eyes. Because you are worth fighting for. You always have been. The words were simple, but they meant everything. Harry leaned against his guardian, the grief for Sirius mixing with gratitude for the man who had always been there. The road ahead was dark, but he wouldn't walk it alone. The 5th year was over. The war had begun, and Harry Potter, the boy who lived, was ready to fight. Chapter 19, The Hidden Blade. The summer after Sirius's death was a void. Harry moved through the days like a ghost, his grief a physical weight that pressed down on everything. Spinner's End, once a sanctuary, felt like a prison. Snape was gone more often than not, the Order's work intensifying as Voldemort's influence spread. When Snape was home, they trained. Harry threw himself into it with a desperation that bordered on obsession. He learned to fight without a wand, to resist the Imperious Curse, to identify and counter the darkest magic. His skills grew, but so did his emptiness. The letters from Ron and Hermione were frequent, but they felt distant. They were still children, in some ways. Harry no longer felt like a child. He felt ancient, worn, like an old soldier waiting for the final battle. One evening, Snape returned with news. Dumbledore wanted Harry. Private lessons. Starting immediately. What kind of lessons? Harry asked. Snape's expression was unreadable. He didn't say, but he emphasized that they are important. Critical, even. The first lesson was in Dumbledore's office. The headmaster looked older, wearier, but his eyes still twinkled. Harry, I need to show you something. Something I have suspected for some time, and now must confirm. He drew his wand and touched it to his temple. A silvery strand of memory emerged, which he placed in the pensieve. Look. Harry leaned in. He saw a young Tom Riddle. Orphaned, brilliant, charming, and deeply, fundamentally wrong. He saw him discover his heritage, delve into the dark arts, create his first Horcrux. The memories continued, lesson after lesson. Dumbledore showed him Voldemort's past, his family, his rise to power. He showed him the objects Voldemort had cherished, the ones most likely to contain pieces of his soul. The diary was one, Dumbledore said. Destroyed by you in the chamber. We must find the others. Marvolo's ring, Slytherin's locket, Hufflepuff's cup, something of Ravenclaw's or Gryffindor's. And Nagini, his snake. Horcruxes, Harry breathed. He made more than one. Yes, I believe he made 7. 7 pieces of soul, hidden across the world. 2. Destroy Voldemort, we must destroy them all. The task was overwhelming. Horcruxes hidden for decades, protected by dark magic, scattered across the globe. How could they possibly find them all? But Harry understood now. This was his purpose. Not just to fight Voldemort, but to hunt the pieces of his soul, to strip away his immortality, to make him mortal again. The lessons continued through the autumn. Dumbledore showed him memories, taught him to recognize dark magic, prepared him for the hunt to come. Harry absorbed it all, his mind sharpening, his purpose clarifying. But the visions continued. Voldemort's mind pressed against his, images and emotions bleeding through. Harry learned to control it, to block it, but the connection remained. A double-edged sword, a weapon and a vulnerability. One night, he dreamed of a door. A heavy, black door with a serpent for a handle. Behind it, something called to him. Something important. He told Dumbledore, who grew very still. A door. Can you describe it? Harry did. Dumbledore's face paled. The Department of Mysteries. He's looking for the prophecy. He wants it destroyed. But why? If it's about us, why does he want it gone? Because it contains information he doesn't have. The full prophecy. Only those to whom it refers can retrieve it. He wants you to get it for him. The realization was chilling. Voldemort was using their connection, trying to lure Harry to the Ministry. The battle the previous year had been a trap, but this was something else. This was manipulation. Harry strengthened his occlumency, building walls higher and higher. But the dreams persisted, the pull growing stronger. He was running out of time. The 6th year at Hogwarts was a blur of lessons, training, and the growing shadow of war. Students disappeared, their families targeted by Death Eaters. The Prophet was full of attacks, disappearances, fear. The magical world was on the brink. Harry watched it all, feeling helpless. He trained harder, learned faster, but it never felt like enough. Snape pushed him mercilessly, sensing the urgency. You are not just fighting for yourself anymore, Snape said during one session. You are fighting for everyone. Every student in this castle. Every family hiding in fear. Every person who looks to you for hope. The weight was crushing, but Harry bore it. He had no choice. The night Dumbledore died, Harry felt it before it happened. A vision, sharp and clear. The astronomy tower. A dark mark. A flash of green light. He ran. He ran faster than he had ever run, but he was too late. Dumbledore lay at the base of the tower, his eyes closed, his face peaceful. And above, fleeing into the night, was Snape. No, not Snape. It couldn't be. But the evidence was there. Snape had killed Dumbledore. Snape, his guardian, his protector, his father in all but blood, was a traitor. Harry's world shattered. He chased them, screamed curses, but they were gone. Dumbledore was dead. Snape was a murderer. And Harry was alone. The funeral was a blur of grief and disbelief. Harry stood apart, unable to process, unable to feel. Ron and Hermione were there, their faces pale, their hands holding his. But he felt nothing. Just a vast, empty numbness. Afterwards, in Dumbledore's office, the portrait of the late headmaster spoke. Harry, there is something you must know. Severus acted on my orders. I was dying anyway, cursed beyond repair. We arranged it together. He must be Voldemort's man now, trusted above all others. It is the only way. The words took a moment to penetrate. When they did, Harry's knees buckled. He's not a traitor. He killed you because you asked him to. Yes, it was the only way to secure his position. The war depends on it. You must not tell anyone, Harry. Not even Ron and Hermione. Severus's life depends on your silence. Harry sat in the office for a long time after that, the truth slowly sinking in. Snape was still his guardian. Still his protector. Still fighting, even now, in the heart of enemy territory. The grief didn't vanish, but it transformed. Into purpose. Into determination. Snape was out there, alone, risking everything. The least Harry could do was survive. Was fight. Was win. The 7th year was coming. The war was escalating. And Harry Potter, armed with the truth and a mission, was finally ready to face his destiny. Chapter 20, The Prince's Tale. The days after Dumbledore's funeral were a strange, suspended time. Harry stayed at the Burrow, surrounded by the warmth of the Weasley family, but he felt detached, as if watching his life from a great distance. The truth about Snape was a secret he carried alone, a burning coal in his chest. Ron and Hermione sensed his distance but attributed it to grief. They didn't push, for which Harry was grateful. He spent hours staring at the dark mark on his arm, the scar on his forehead, the ring on his finger. Reminders of what he was, what he had to do. The wedding was a brief moment of brightness. Fleur and Bill, married despite the war, despite the scars Bill bore from Fenrir Greyback. There was dancing, laughter, a fleeting sense of normalcy. Then the Patronus came. The Ministry had fallen. The Death Eaters were coming. They ran. Harry, Ron, and Hermione, dissipating into the night, leaving everything behind. The months that followed were the hardest of Harry's life. They moved constantly, camping in forests, hiding in abandoned houses, surviving on scraps and determination. The hunt for Horcruxes consumed them. They followed Dumbledore's clues, chasing leads that often led nowhere. The locket was the first. They found it at Grimmauld Place, stolen by Mundungus Fletcher, sold to Umbridge. They infiltrated the Ministry, a terrifying ordeal that left them shaken but victorious. The locket was theirs, but destroying it was another matter. The sword of Gryffindor was lost, or so they thought. Then, in the depths of the Forest of Dean, a silver doe appeared. A Patronus, leading them to the sword. Harry followed, his heart pounding. The doe led him to a frozen pool, the sword gleaming beneath the ice. He stripped, plunged in, and as his fingers closed around the hilt, the locket around his neck tightened, trying to drown him. A hand grabbed him, pulled him out. Ron was back. They destroyed the locket together, the sword plunging through its dark heart. Voldemort's scream echoed in their minds, and another piece of his soul was gone. But the questions burned. Whose Patronus was the doe? Who had led them to the sword? Harry knew, in his heart, but he couldn't say it. Not yet. The search continued. They found the cup in Gringotts, a heist that nearly killed them. They escaped on the back of a dragon, soaring into the night, free but hunted. And then, the vision. Voldemort's mind, open to him. He was at Hogwarts. He knew about the Horcruxes. He was coming. They had to get there first. They had to warn them. Hogwarts was under siege when they arrived. The battle had begun. Students fought alongside teachers, order members alongside former rivals. The castle, ancient and proud, became a fortress. Harry moved through the chaos, searching for what he needed. Ravenclaw's diadem, the last Horcrux, hidden in the Room of Requirement. He found it, fought for it, destroyed it with a basilisk fang. But in the Room of Requirement, something else happened. A figure emerged from the shadows. Draco Malfoy, with Crabbe and Goyle. They fought. Crabbe cast Fiendfire, the cursed fire that consumed everything. They escaped, but the fire raged, and Crabbe was lost. Harry didn't have time to process. The battle raged on. He saw Fred fall. He saw Lupin and Tonks, their bodies lying together in death. The grief was overwhelming, but he pushed on. He had to find Voldemort. He had to end it. Then, the pause. The silence. Voldemort's voice, amplified by magic, offering a deal. Harry Potter, alone, in the Forbidden Forest. Or everyone died. Harry knew what he had to do. The prophecy. The connection. He had to die so that Voldemort could be killed. He walked into the forest, his heart heavy but his mind clear. He thought of his parents, of Sirius, of Dumbledore. He thought of Ron and Hermione, of the Weasleys, of everyone he loved. And he thought of Snape, alone in the dark, playing his deadly game. He found Voldemort in a clearing, surrounded by Death Eaters. The Dark Lord raised his wand. Avada Kedavra. Green light. And then, nothing. But Harry didn't die. He was in a place that was not a place, speaking with Dumbledore, learning the final truth. The piece of Voldemort's soul inside him had been destroyed. He was free. He returned to his body, feigning death. He was carried to Hogwarts as a trophy, a symbol of victory. But he was watching, waiting. The battle resumed. And in the chaos, Harry slipped away. He found Voldemort in the Great Hall, gloating over his apparent victory. Harry threw off the invisibility cloak. "I'm dead," he said, "but I'm also alive. And I'm ready to finish this." The duel was short and brutal. Voldemort's spells, powerful but unfocused, clashed with Harry's precise, trained magic. They circled each other, two wizards bound by prophecy and fate. Then, Harry saw it. Nagini, the snake, coiling at Voldemort's feet. The last Horcrux. He had to destroy it before he could kill Voldemort. Neville, bloodied but unbowed, stepped forward. With a single, powerful stroke of Gryffindor's sword, he beheaded the serpent. The last piece of Voldemort's soul was gone. Voldemort screamed, a sound of pure rage and despair. He turned on Neville, but Harry was faster. His spell, a simple Expelliarmus, met Voldemort's killing curse. The wands, brothers, connected. Golden light. And this time, Harry was stronger. The light pushed back, enveloping Voldemort, tearing through him. He fell, his body crumbling, his soul finally, utterly destroyed. Silence. Then, chaos. Cheers. Weeping. The battle was over. Voldemort was dead. Harry stood in the center of it all, the echoes of the fight still ringing in his ears. He was alive. His friends were alive, but so many were not. He found Ron and Hermione, hugging them fiercely. He found the Weasleys, grieving for Fred but celebrating the victory. And then, he remembered. Snape. Where was Snape? He found him in the Shrieking Shack. Voldemort, in his paranoia, had killed him. Nagini's venom, burning through his veins. He was dying. Harry knelt beside him, tears streaming down his face. Severus. Severus, I'm here. Snape's eyes fluttered open. He looked at Harry, and for a moment, the mask was gone. Just pain, and love, and a desperate need to speak. Take them. His hand, shaking, reached for Harry's. In it was a vial, filled with silvery memories. Take them to the Pensieve. You need to see everything. I will, Harry promised. I will. Just hold on. We can get help. No. Snape's grip tightened. It's too late. But you have to know. You have to understand. Your mother. I loved her, and I failed her. But you I did not fail. You are my greatest achievement, Harry. My only, good thing. Tears fell from Harry's eyes, dropping onto Snape's pale face. You didn't fail. You saved me. You raised me. You loved me. That's not failure. That's everything. A ghost of a smile touched Snape's lips. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I kept my word. I will. I promise. Snape's eyes held Harry's for one more moment. Then, they closed. His hand went limp. He was gone. Harry bowed his head, the grief overwhelming. The man who had raised him, who had protected him, who had loved him in his own silent, fierce way, was dead. He was alone. But as he sat there, holding Snape's hand, he knew he wasn't really alone. The memories in the vial would tell him everything. The truth about Snape's life, his sacrifices, his love. And Harry would carry that truth with him forever. The war was over. The dead were mourned. And Harry Potter, the boy who lived, finally understood the depth of the love that had saved him, again and again. He looked at Snape's still face, at the man who had been his father in every way that mattered, and made a silent vow. "I'll tell the world," he whispered. "I'll tell them what you did. Who you really were. I'll make sure they know." He gently closed Snape's eyes, then stood. The world was waiting. The future was uncertain. But one thing was clear. Severus Snape, the half-blood prince, the spy, the guardian, the father, would never be forgotten. Harry walked out of the shrieking shack, the vial of memories clutched in his hand, and into the dawn of a new world. The castle was quiet now. The battle had ended hours ago, but the halls still echoed with the sounds of healing, whispers of spells, soft footsteps of searchers, occasional sobs from those who had found their dead. Harry moved through the corridors like a ghost, the vial of memories clutched so tightly in his fist that the glass pressed ridges into his palm. Ron and Hermione had wanted to come with him. He had refused. This was something he needed to do alone. The entrance to the headmaster's office was unguarded now. The gargoyle sprang aside at his whispered password, Dumbledore, and Harry climbed the spiral staircase, each step heavier than the last. The office was unchanged. The portraits of former headmasters dozed in their frames. Fawkes's perch stood empty, the phoenix having vanished after Dumbledore's death. And on the desk, exactly where it had always been, sat the pensieve. Harry approached it slowly. He uncorked the vial, and the silvery memories flowed into the basin, swirling like liquid light. He took a breath, the air thick with the scent of old books and lemon drops, and lowered his face into the memory. He was a boy again. Not himself, but watching through another's eyes. Severus's eyes. The first memory was the playground. He had seen it before, in Dumbledore's pensieve. But this time it was different. This time, he felt what Snape had felt. The longing, the hope, the desperate, consuming need for connection. Lily was there, laughing, making the flower bloom. Young Snape watched from behind a bush, his heart so full it hurt. "You're a witch," he said, stepping out. "I've been watching you for a while." Harry felt the awkwardness, the desperate hope that she wouldn't run away. And when she smiled, when she asked him to show her more, the joy that flooded through young Severus was almost unbearable. The memory shifted. They were older now. Hogwarts. The train. Lily was excited, talking about houses and magic. Snape sat across from her, drinking in every word. "I hope I'm in Gryffindor," Lily said. "It sounds so exciting." Snape's stomach dropped. "Gryffindor. But my whole family have been Slytherin." "Slytherin." Lily's nose wrinkled. "Isn't that the house where they all go bad?" The hurt in young Snape was sharp, cutting. But he pushed it down. She didn't understand. She would learn. Another shift. The sorting. The hat barely touched Snape's head before it shouted, "Slytherin." He looked across the hall to the Gryffindor table, where Lily was. Clapping politely, already surrounded by new friends. A boy with messy black hair was leaning over, saying something that made her laugh. James Potter. Jealousy, hot and poisonous, flooded through him. The memories accelerated. Years of small moments. Lily and Snape, growing apart. Lily, always surrounded by Potter and his friends. Snape, drawn to the boys who whispered about the dark arts, about power, about a world where Muggle-borns like Lily would know their place. A moment of weakness. The word, spat in anger after Potter had humiliated him. Mudblood. Lily's face, hurt and furious. "I'm sorry, Severus. I can't pretend anymore. You've chosen your way, I've chosen mine." The agony of that moment was so intense Harry nearly pulled out of the memory. Snape's heart, shattering into 1,000 pieces. Watching her walk away, knowing he had destroyed the only good thing in his life. The memories grew darker. Initiation into the Death Eaters. The first kill. The mark burning on his arm. And always, underneath it all, the image of Lily's face, a beacon of guilt and longing. Then, the prophecy. Overheard at the Hog's Head. Carried to the Dark Lord like a fool, like the desperate, love-starved idiot he was. And then, the realization. The Dark Lord had chosen. He would go after the Potters. After Lily. Snape's world collapsed. He was on his knees in front of Dumbledore, the first time Harry had ever seen him truly vulnerable. Anything, Snape gasped. I'll do anything. Just keep her safe. Protect her. Dumbledore's face was grave. And what will you give me in return, Severus? Anything. Everything. The headmaster studied him for a long moment. Then I want your loyalty. Your complete and utter loyalty. From this moment until the end. Yes. Yes, anything. Dumbledore nodded slowly. Then I will do what I can. The night Godric's Hollow. Snape, waiting in agony, feeling the dark mark burn as Voldemort fell. Knowing, somehow, that Lily was gone. Dumbledore's office again. The headmaster's face was sad. She's dead, Severus. I'm so sorry. The scream that tore from Snape's throat was animal, primal. He fell to the floor, his whole body shaking, grief so total it seemed to crack the very air. I told you to protect her. He howled. I gave you everything, and you let her die. We failed, Dumbledore said quietly. Both of us. But there is still something you can do. What? Snape's voice was broken, desperate. What could possibly matter now? Her son, Harry. He survived. He needs protection. He needs someone who will love him, raise him, keep him safe from those who would use him. Snape looked up, his face ravaged. Her son, Lily's son. James's too, yes. But Lily's eyes, they say. Lily's eyes in a living boy. Something flickered in Snape's grief-stricken face. A spark, a purpose. Where is he? The night on the doorstep. Harry knew this memory, but seeing it from Snape's eyes was different. The cold, the fear, the basket on the step. He looked down at the baby, and his heart stopped. Green eyes. Her eyes. Looking up at him, confused and afraid. Leave him, a voice whispered. He's Potter's brat. Leave him to die. But then the tiny hand reached up and grasped his finger. The grip was warm, strong, alive. Snape wept. For the first time since childhood, he wept. And in that moment, he made a choice. Not for Dumbledore. Not for the Order. For her. For Lily. He would raise this boy. He would protect him. He would love him, the only way he knew how. The years passed in flashes. First steps. First words. First potion successfully brewed, the pride in the boy's green eyes so like her that it hurt. The training, the discipline, the fierce, silent love that grew between them. Harry at 7, asking why they hid. Snape's careful explanation, watching the boy's face harden with understanding. Will they ever stop looking for me? Perhaps one day. When you are older. When you are strong enough to face them. The boy nodded, accepting it. Trusting him. Loving him. Snape felt something crack open in his chest. This child, this miracle of green eyes and messy hair, was his redemption. His purpose. His reason for living. Hogwarts. The first year. Watching from the staff table as Harry was sorted into Gryffindor. Pride, fear, and a strange, aching loss. He was growing up. He was becoming his own person. The Philosopher's Stone. Snape, playing the villain to protect Harry, to draw attention away from Quirrell. The look of betrayal in Harry's eyes when he thought Snape was trying to kill him. It was a knife to the heart. But then, later, the hospital wing. Harry looking at him with dawning understanding. You were trying to protect me. All this time. Snape couldn't speak. He just reached out and touched the boy's forehead, a gesture of love he could never put into words. The years continued. The chamber. Sirius Black. The Triwizard Tournament. Each memory showed Snape watching, protecting, loving from the shadows. Never able to say the words, but always there. Always fighting. The night in the Pensieve, when Harry finally saw his memories. Saw his love for Lily. Saw his guilt. Saw everything. And Harry hugged him. Snape stood frozen, his arms at his sides, overwhelmed. Then, slowly, awkwardly, he hugged back. The first real embrace of his life. You are my redemption, he whispered. You are my only good thing. The final memories were the hardest. Dumbledore's plan. The cursed hand. The request. You must kill me, Severus. It is the only way to secure your position with the Dark Lord. No. Snape's voice was raw. I can't. I won't. You must. For Harry. For the final victory. I am already dead, Severus. This just gives your cover the strength it needs. The agony of that moment. The knowledge of what he had to do. And the doing of it, on the tower, looking into Dumbledore's eyes as he cast the spell. Running. Hiding. Playing the traitor while inside, he was dying. And then, the final memory. The Shrieking Shack. Voldemort, convinced Snape was the master of the Elder Wand, killing him without hesitation. As the venom burned through his veins, Snape had one thought. One face. Green eyes, looking at him with love. You have your mother's eyes, he whispered to the empty air. And you have my heart. Always. He pulled the memories from his mind, pouring them into the vial. Harry would find him. Harry would understand. Harry would know. Know that he was loved. That he had always been loved. That Severus Snape, the bitter, broken man from Spinner's End, had given everything for him. And as the darkness closed in, Snape smiled. For the first time in his life, he smiled without bitterness. Lily, he whispered. I kept my word. I kept him safe. I loved him. I hope that's enough. Harry pulled from the pensieve, gasping. Tears streamed down his face, unchecked, unashamed. He had known Snape loved him, in his own way. But this was everything. A lifetime of sacrifice, of silent devotion, of love so deep it had reshaped a man's entire existence. He looked at the vial, now empty, and clutched it to his chest. I'll tell them, he whispered, echoing his promise in the Shrieking Shack. I'll tell them everything. Who you really were. What you did. They'll know, Severus. They'll all know. The portrait stirred. Dilys Derwent wiped a tear from her painted eye. Phineas Nigellus looked unusually subdued. Even Dumbledore's portrait, which had been watching in silence, nodded slowly. He was the bravest man I ever knew, Dumbledore's portrait said quietly. And the most loyal. He loved you, Harry. More than you will ever know. I know now, Harry said. I know. He left the office as dawn broke over the castle, painting the sky in shades of golden rose. The war was over. The dead were mourned. And Harry carried with him the truth of Severus Snape, the spy, the protector, the father, etched forever on his heart. Chapter 22, The Aftermath. The weeks after the battle were a blur of funerals and farewells. Harry attended them all, standing stoic through service after service, his face a mask that hid the chaos within. Fred Weasley, Remus Lupin, Nymphadora Tonks, Colin Creevey, who had snuck back to fight despite being underage. So many others. But the funeral that broke him was the one that never happened. Snape's body had been recovered from the Shrieking Shack and brought back to the castle. Harry had insisted on handling the arrangements himself. No ministry officials. No grand ceremony. Just a quiet burial in the graveyard of the little church in Cokeworth, beside the mill that Snape had hated so much. It was raining, of course. It always rained in Cokeworth. Harry stood alone at the graveside, the only mourner. Ron and Hermione had offered to come, but Harry had declined. This was private. This was between him and the man who had raised him. The coffin was simple, unadorned. Harry had chosen it himself. He watched it lower into the ground, each inch a fresh wound. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm sorry I didn't know sooner. I'm sorry I doubted you. I'm sorry for everything. The rain fell harder, plastering his hair to his forehead, soaking through his robes. He didn't move. You were my father, he said, his voice cracking. Not by blood, but you were. You taught me everything. You protected me. You loved me, even when you couldn't say it. And I loved you too. I hope you knew that. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the ring. His mother's ring, the one Snape had given him years ago. He had worn it every day since. Now, he slipped it off his finger and held it over the grave. I'll keep it, he said. I'll keep it forever. But I wanted you to know. I wanted to leave something with you. He dropped a small vial into the grave. It contained a single tear, shed at the moment he had watched Snape's memories. A symbol of everything he felt. I'll make sure they know, he promised. I'll tell the world what you did. Who you really were. The half-blood prince. The spy. The protector. My father. He stood there for a long time after the grave was covered, the rain washing away his tears. When he finally turned to leave, he saw them. Ron and Hermione, standing at the gate of the churchyard, waiting. They had come anyway. They stood in the rain, silent and respectful, a silent tribute to the man who had given everything. Harry walked to them, and they embraced, the three of them holding each other in the rain. Let's go home, Hermione said softly. Harry nodded. Home. He wasn't sure where that was anymore. But as long as he had them, as long as he had the memories, he would find his way. The ministry was in chaos. The aftermath of Voldemort's defeat had exposed decades of corruption, incompetence, and outright collaboration. Kingsley Shacklebolt had been appointed temporary minister, and his first act was to clear the names of the innocent. Sirius Black was officially exonerated. His portrait now hung in Grimmauld Place, and Harry visited it often, talking to his godfather about everything and nothing. It wasn't the same, but it was something. Peter Pettigrew's betrayal was exposed. The Daily Prophet ran a full exposé, complete with interviews from those who had known him. The wizarding world was shocked, then outraged, then, as always, ready to move on. But the story that mattered most to Harry was the one he told himself. He sat down with an elderly witch from the Daily Prophet, a serious woman named Ethel Pruitt who had been recommended by Kingsley himself. She listened without interrupting as Harry told her everything. Snape's childhood, his friendship with Lily, his time as a Death Eater, his repentance, his years as a spy, his sacrifice. When Harry finished, Ethel was silent for a long moment. "This is an extraordinary story, Mr. Potter. It's the truth. I believe you." She paused. "The wizarding world will not know what to do with it. They have spent years believing Severus Snape was a villain. To accept that he was a hero, it will be difficult." "Then we make them accept it," Harry said firmly. "We tell the story. We tell it until they can't ignore it anymore." The article ran a week later. It was front-page news, with a moving sketch of Snape's face and the headline, "The Spy Who Loved, Severus Snape's Secret War." The reaction was immediate and divided. Some refused to believe it, clinging to their old prejudices. Others wept, remembering the man they had misunderstood. Letters flooded the Prophet, some supportive, some vicious. But the truth was out there now, and it couldn't be taken back. Harry didn't care about the controversy. He cared that the world knew. He cared that Snape's sacrifice was recognized. He kept one copy of the Prophet, folded carefully, and placed it on the grave in Cokeworth. "There," he said quietly. "Now they know. I kept my promise." The trials began in autumn. Death Eaters were rounded up, brought to justice, and sentenced to life in Azkaban. Harry testified at many of them, his calm, precise accounts helping to ensure that justice was served. But one trial was different. Lucius Malfoy, exposed as a Death Eater, stood before the Wizengamot with his family. Narcissa, pale and trembling. Draco, broken and silent. Harry watched them from the gallery, remembering Malfoy's sneers, his cruelty, his attempts to ruin Harry at every turn. He should have felt satisfaction. He felt nothing. Narcissa's testimony changed everything. She told the court how she had lied to Voldemort, told him Harry was dead when she knew he was alive. She had done it to find Draco, to save her son. It didn't excuse her other actions, but it mattered. Harry stepped forward when called. He looked at Draco, at the hollow-eyed boy who had once been his rival. "Draco Malfoy did not fight at the final battle," Harry said quietly. "He was there, but he didn't raise his wand against anyone from our side. He was trying to find his mother. He was trying to survive." The courtroom murmured. Draco stared at Harry, shock on his face. "His parents made choices," Harry continued. "Terrible choices. But Draco was a child, used as a pawn. He deserves a chance. We all deserve a chance." The verdict was lenient. Probation. Monitoring. A chance at redemption. Afterwards, Draco approached him in the corridor. He looked smaller than Harry remembered, diminished. "Why?" Draco asked, his voice hoarse. "After everything I did, why?" Harry thought of Snape, of second chances, of the man who had been given one and used it to save the world. "Because everyone deserves a chance to choose differently," Harry said. "Take it, Malfoy. Don't waste it." He walked away, leaving Draco standing in the corridor, staring after him. The rebuilding of Hogwarts took months. Harry threw himself into it, working alongside the other survivors to restore the castle to its former glory. It was healing work, physical and tangible, a way to fight back against the destruction. He walked the corridors often, remembering. Here was where he had first met Ron. Here was where Hermione had been petrified. Here was where Snape had taught him to brew, his sharp voice a constant presence. The dungeon classroom was untouched. Harry stood in the doorway, looking at the workbenches, the cauldrons, the shelves of ingredients. He could almost hear Snape's voice, see his black robes swirling as he moved between the students. He walked to the front of the room and opened the small cupboard behind the desk. Inside, carefully labeled, was a collection of potions. Not the standard ones used in lessons. These were personal. A pepper-up potion, brewed specifically for Harry's childhood colds. A dreamless sleep draft, the recipe adjusted to Harry's unique magical signature. A small vial of something silvery, labeled simply, for Harry, when he needs to remember. Harry uncorked it and inhaled. The scent was familiar, Snape's scent, a mixture of potions ingredients and old books. He closed his eyes and let the memory wash over him. "Thank you," he whispered. "For everything." He took the vial with him, adding it to the small collection of treasures he kept. His mother's ring, the Marauder's map, the broken pieces of the snitch Dumbledore had left him. And now, Snape's memory potion. They were all he had left of the people who had loved him. They were enough. Christmas came, the first since the war. Harry spent it at the Burrow, surrounded by the Weasleys. It was loud, chaotic, and wonderful. Mrs. Weasley cooked enough food to feed an army. Mr. Weasley talked excitedly about Muggle inventions. The twins, George especially, laughed and joked, though there was a sadness in his eyes that would never fully fade. Harry sat by the fire, watching them all, feeling the warmth seep into his bones. Hermione was beside him, her head on his shoulder. Ron was across the room, arm wrestling with Charlie and losing spectacularly. It was good. It was peace. But his mind wandered, as it often did, to Spinner's End. To the cramped little house where he had grown up. To the man who had raised him. He would go back there eventually. He knew that. The house was his now, left to him in a will Harry hadn't known existed until the goblins notified him. Snape had left him everything. The house, the books, the potions, the memories. But not yet. He wasn't ready yet. For now, he would stay here, with his new family. He would heal. He would live. And when he was ready, he would go home. Chapter 23, The Prince's Legacy. Spring came slowly to the English countryside. Harry watched it arrive from the windows of Grimmauld Place, where he had taken up residence after the holidays. The old black house was still gloomy, still oppressive, but Harry was slowly making it his own. Creature, transformed by the gift of Regulus's locket, had become a devoted if still somewhat creepy ally, keeping the house clean and cooking meals that were surprisingly edible. The portrait of Sirius hung in the drawing room, and Harry spent hours talking to him. It wasn't the same as having him there, but it helped. Sirius told him stories about his parents, about their time at Hogwarts, about the Marauders. Some of the stories made Harry laugh. Some made him cry. All of them made him feel connected to a past he had never known. But it was the other portrait that surprised him. Phineas Nigellus Black, Sirius's great-great-grandfather and former headmaster of Hogwarts, had always been dismissive and condescending. But after the war, something changed. Perhaps it was Harry's treatment of Creature. Perhaps it was the respect he showed to the house elf. Perhaps it was simply that Phineas Nigellus, for all his faults, recognized courage when he saw it. Whatever the reason, the portrait began to talk to Harry. Real conversations, not just snide remarks. He told Harry about the old days, about the founding of Hogwarts, about magic that had been lost over the centuries. And, eventually, he told Harry about Snape. "I watched him, you know," Phineas Nigellus said one evening, his painted eyes unusually serious. "In the headmaster's office, after Dumbledore died. He would come in late at night, when he thought no one was watching. He would sit in Dumbledore's chair and just stare." Harry listened, his heart aching. "He never spoke of you. Not directly. But he would look at the portrait of your mother. He had asked for it to be moved there, you know. After Dumbledore's death, he would look at it for hours. I didn't know that. Few did. That was his way. He suffered in silence, loved in silence, died in silence." Phineas Nigellus shook his head. "A foolish way to live, if you ask me. But a noble way to die." Harry nodded slowly. "He wasn't good at showing it. But he showed me in other ways. Every day. I just didn't always recognize it. You were a child. Children are not meant to recognize such things. They are meant to be loved without understanding it." The portrait paused. He understood that. He loved you anyway. The invitation came in late April. A formal scroll, sealed with the Hogwarts crest. Harry broke the wax and read it quickly. "Dear Mr. Potter, the Board of Governors and the interim headmistress, Professor McGonagall, request the honor of your presence at a ceremony to be held on the 1st of May. On this day, we will formally dedicate a new memorial to those who fell in the Battle of Hogwarts. We would be honored if you would speak. Additionally, the board wishes to inform you that, by unanimous vote, the potions classroom will be renamed in honor of Professor Severus Snape, whose contributions to the defeat of Lord Voldemort have been posthumously recognized. We hope you will attend the dedication. Yours sincerely, Professor Minerva McGonagall, Headmistress, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Harry read the letter 3 times. The potions classroom, Snape's classroom, named for him. It was fitting, it was right, and it hurt more than Harry had expected. He wrote back immediately, accepting. The 1st of May was bright and clear, a sharp contrast to the dark events being commemorated. Harry arrived at Hogwarts early, walking through the gates alone. He wanted to see the castle before the crowds came. It was beautiful. The damage had been repaired, the walls rebuilt, the grounds restored. Students were everywhere, going about their daily lives, laughing and talking as if the war had never happened. That, Harry thought, was the greatest victory. Not the defeat of Voldemort, but the return of normalcy. He walked to the Great Hall, where the memorial would be held. A large stone tablet had been erected near the entrance, covered with names. Hundreds of names. Harry ran his fingers over them, reading each one. Colin Creevey, Remus Lupin, Nymphadora Tonks, Fred Weasley, so many more. And there, at the bottom, added after the others, Severus Snape. Headmaster, Spy, Hero. Harry's breath caught. He touched the name, the stone warm under his fingers. I hope you're okay with that, he whispered. Hero, I know you'd hate the fuss. But you earned it. The ceremony was long and emotional. Kingsley Shacklebolt spoke. Minerva McGonagall spoke, her voice cracking with grief more than once. Harry spoke last, his words simple and from the heart. We're here to remember, he said, looking out at the sea of faces. To remember those we lost. To remember what they fought for. To remember that they are gone, but not forgotten. They live on in us. In the choices we make. In the way we treat each other. In the love we carry forward. He paused, thinking of Snape. There was a man I knew. A man who made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But who spent the rest of his life trying to make up for them. He loved. He sacrificed. He gave everything. And in the end, he helped save us all. I hope, wherever he is, he knows that we remember. That we honor him. That we love him. He stepped back, and the hall was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, the applause began. It built and built until it was deafening. Harry looked up at the enchanted ceiling, at the clear blue sky beyond, and smiled. The potions classroom dedication was smaller, more intimate. McGonagall had invited only a handful of people, order members, former students who had known Snape, and Harry. A new plaque had been mounted above the door. It read, "The Severus Snape Memorial Potions Laboratory. For those select few who possess the predisposition." Harry smiled at the quote. Snape's first words to every new class. It was perfect. Inside, the room had been restored exactly as it was. The same workbenches. The same cauldrons. The same shelves of ingredients. Harry walked to the front, to the desk where Snape had stood for so many years, and placed a small vial on it. The memory potion. It belonged here, among the things Snape had loved. Thank you, he said quietly. For everything. I'll try to be worthy of it. Of you. I'll try to live a life that honors what you gave me. He turned and walked out, closing the door gently behind him. The legacy of the Half-Blood Prince would live on, in this room, in the students who learned here, and in the heart of the boy he had raised. Summer came, and with it, a new beginning. Harry had made a decision. He would not become an Auror. He had fought enough. Instead, he would do something else. Something that mattered. He applied for the position of Defense Against the Dark Arts professor at Hogwarts. McGonagall accepted immediately. It's what you were meant to do, Harry, she said. You have more practical experience than anyone alive. And you have something else. Something that can't be taught. You have heart. Harry started that September. His classes were unlike any that had come before. He taught real defense, not theory. He taught his students to think, to adapt, to survive. He used the techniques Snape had taught him, the exercises Dumbledore had shown him, the lessons learned in the darkest moments of the war. And at the end of each day, he would walk to the potions classroom. He would stand outside the door for a moment, remembering. Then he would go inside, to the small office in the back that had been converted into a memorial. Snape's portrait hung there now. Harry had commissioned it himself, from a talented young witch who had studied under the famous portrait painter. It was perfect. Snape stood in his usual pose, arms crossed, expression stern. But if you looked closely, you could see the faintest hint of warmth in his dark eyes. Harry would sit in the chair across from the portrait and talk. About his day. About his students. About the world. The portrait didn't speak. Snape had never sat for it while alive, so it was just an image, but Harry liked to imagine he was listening. "You'd be proud of them," Harry said one evening. "The students, I mean. They're not all natural potioneers. But they try. They work hard. They're good kids." He paused, smiling. "Just like you said. For those select few who possess the predisposition. You'd be surprised how many do. They just need someone to believe in them." He stood, ready to leave, then stopped. "I miss you," he said quietly. "Every day. But I'm okay. I'm doing what you taught me. Living, fighting, loving. It's enough. It's more than enough." He touched the portrait gently, then walked out into the night, the castle quiet around him. The legacy of Severus Snape lived on, in the hearts of all who had known him, and in the boy who called him father. Chapter 24, The Spinner's End Return. It was nearly a year after the war when Harry finally returned to Spinner's End. The house looked exactly as he remembered it. The same grimy bricks, the same narrow windows, the same chipped door. The street was quiet, as always, the only sound the distant hum of the mill and the occasional bark of a dog. Harry stood outside for a long moment, his hand on the gate. He wasn't sure he could do this. The memories were so strong here, so present. Every corner of this house held a piece of his childhood, a piece of Snape. He pushed open the gate and walked up the short path. The key was still under the loose brick by the door, just where it had always been. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. The smell hit him first. Potions, ingredients, old books, dust, home. He stood in the narrow hallway, letting his eyes adjust to the dim light. Everything was exactly as they had left it. The worn coat rack, the threadbare rug, the stairs leading up to the bedrooms. He walked slowly through the house, touching things as he went. The kitchen table, where he had sat for countless meals. The workbench, where he had learned to brew. The armchair in the front room, where Snape had sat every evening, reading or simply staring into the fire. Harry sat in the armchair. It creaked under his weight, just as it always had. He closed his eyes and let the memories wash over him. He remembered being 4 years old, sitting on Snape's lap while the fire crackled. He remembered being 7, proudly showing off his first successfully brewed potion. He remembered being 10, learning to cast his Patronus in this very room. He remembered the night he had left for Hogwarts, the fear and excitement mingling. He remembered Snape's hand on his shoulder, the silent reassurance. And he remembered coming home for holidays, the relief of walking through this door, of being safe, of being loved. Tears pricked at his eyes. He didn't wipe them away. "I'm home," he whispered. "I'm finally home." He spent the next week cleaning. Not with magic, that felt wrong somehow. He did it by hand, scrubbing floors, dusting shelves, washing windows. It was therapeutic, a way of saying goodbye and hello at the same time. He found things. Old potions, notes in Snape's cramped handwriting. A photograph of Lily, tucked into a book. A letter Harry had written when he was 8, full of childish drawings and misspelled words. Snape had kept it. Of course he had. In the bedroom that had been Harry's, he found a box under the bed. Inside were more letters, every one Harry had ever written from Hogwarts. They were carefully organized by date, each one pristine, as if they had been read and reread countless times. Harry sat on the bed, the letters spread around him, and wept. The attic was the last place he explored. It was small and dusty, filled with old trunks and forgotten things. Harry spent an afternoon going through them, finding nothing of interest until he reached the last trunk in the corner. This one was different. It was locked, not with a physical lock but with magic. Harry recognized the spell, Snape's signature ward, the one he used on his most private possessions. Harry knew the counter curse. Snape had taught it to him years ago, in case of emergency. He spoke it now, and the lock clicked open. Inside were journals. Dozens of them, spanning decades. Harry picked up the first one, dated to Snape's first year at Hogwarts, and began to read. The journals were a revelation. They chronicled Snape's life in intimate detail, his loneliness, his friendship with Lily, his growing fascination with the dark arts, his regret, his redemption. But more than that, they chronicled his love for Harry. Entry after entry mentioned him. His first word, his first step, his first successful potion, his first day at Hogwarts. Snape had recorded it all, his pride and fear and love pouring onto every page. He looked at me today with those green eyes, and I saw her. I saw Lily. But I also saw him. James. And something else. Something entirely his own. He is becoming his own person, and I am terrified and overjoyed all at once. I do not know how to be a father. I never had one, not really. But I am trying. For him. For her. For all of us. He called me, sir, again today. I wish he would call me something else. But I cannot bring myself to ask. I do not deserve it. He hugged me tonight. After the pensieve, he hugged me, and I did not know what to do. So I hugged him back. It was the best moment of my life. Harry read until his eyes burned, until the sun went down and the attic grew dark. When he finally closed the last journal, he understood. Snape hadn't just loved him. He had cherished him. Every moment, every memory, every precious second. He took the journals with him when he left. They were too precious to leave behind. But he also took something else. A small box he found at the bottom of the trunk, wrapped in velvet and tied with a ribbon. Inside was a ring. Not his mother's ring, he already had that. This was different. Silver, with a single dark stone, engraved with the Prince family crest. A note was tucked beneath it. Harry, if you are reading this, I am gone. This ring belonged to my mother, and to her mother before that. It is the only thing of value my family ever possessed. I want you to have it. Not because you are a prince, you are not by blood. But because you are my son. In every way that matters, you are my son. Wear it, if you like. Or don't. It is yours to do with as you wish. But know this, I loved you. From the moment I found you on that doorstep, cold and alone, I loved you. You gave my life purpose. You gave me hope. You gave me a reason to keep fighting. Be happy, Harry. Live well. Love deeply. That is all I ever wanted for you. Severus. Harry slipped the ring onto his finger, beside his mother's. They fit perfectly together, two halves of a whole. Thank you, he whispered. For everything. I'll make you proud. I promise. He left Spinner's End the next morning, but he knew he would be back. This was his home. It always would be. The house at Spinner's End, with its grimy bricks and cramped rooms and memories of a man in black, would always be waiting for him. He walked to the churchyard before he left. Snape's grave was simple, a plain headstone with his name and dates. Harry had added an inscription himself, words chosen carefully. Severus Snape, *1960-1998. Beloved father. Brave protector. True hero. He knelt beside it, placing a hand on the cold stone. I'm going to be okay, he said quietly. I've got people who love me. I've got work that matters. I've got your journals, your ring, your memories. You're with me. Always. He stood, wiping his eyes. I'll be back. I'll always come back. This is home. Your home. He walked away without looking back, but the love stayed with him. It always would. Chapter 25, The Wedding. The wedding was scheduled for August, a full year after the war. Harry and Ginny had taken their time, wanting to be sure, wanting to build something solid before they committed to forever. But there was never any doubt, really. They had loved each other since before either of them understood what love meant. The burrow was transformed. Mrs. Weasley had outdone herself, covering every surface with flowers and fairy lights and floating candles. The garden was a riot of color, the tent enormous and elegant, the food plentiful and delicious. Harry stood at the altar, Ron beside him as best man, watching Ginny walk down the aisle on her father's arm. She was beautiful. More than beautiful. She was everything, he thought, as he watched her, of all the people who weren't there. His parents, Sirius, Remus, Tonks, Fred, Dumbledore, and Snape, but in a way, they were all there. He carried them with him, in his heart, in his memories, in the choices he made every day. And as Ginny reached him and took his hand, he knew they were watching, smiling, proud. The ceremony was simple and beautiful. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises of love and loyalty and forever. When the officiant pronounced them married, Harry kissed her with all the love in his heart, and the crowd erupted in cheers. The reception was a blur of dancing and laughing and eating. Harry moved through it all, hugging and thanking and celebrating. But his mind kept drifting, as it always did, to the people who were missing. He found himself standing alone at the edge of the tent, looking up at the stars. Ginny found him there, thinking about them. He nodded. Every day, especially today. She slipped her hand into his. They're here, you know. I can feel them. Harry smiled. Yeah, me too. They stood together in silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Then Ginny tugged his hand. Come on, your friends are waiting, and there's cake. He let her lead him back to the party, back to the laughter and love and life. But before he went, he whispered to the night. Thank you, all of you, for everything. I'll be okay. We'll be okay. The stars seemed to twinkle a little brighter, and Harry smiled. The months that followed were the happiest of Harry's life. He and Ginny settled into a small cottage near Ottery Street. Close enough to the Burrow for comfort but far enough for privacy. Harry continued teaching at Hogwarts, commuting by flow each day. Ginny pursued her Quidditch career, playing for the Holyhead Harpies and loving every minute. They were busy. They were happy. They were building a life together. But Harry never forgot. He visited Spinner's End regularly, keeping the house clean, tending the small garden Snape had never had time for. He talked to the portrait in the potions classroom, updating Snape on his life, on the world, on everything. And every year, on the anniversary of the battle, he went to the memorial at Hogwarts. He stood with the others, remembering. He read the names on the stone, pausing longest at one. Severus Snape, his father, his hero, his heart. The news came in the spring of the following year. Ginny was pregnant. Harry stood in the healer's office, staring at the floating image of the tiny baby, and felt his heart expand until he thought it might burst. A boy, the healer said. Perfectly healthy. Congratulations. Harry took Ginny's hand, tears streaming down his face. We're going to have a son, he whispered. Ginny smiled, exhausted but radiant. What should we name him? Harry thought of his father. Of Sirius. Of Remus. Of all the men who had shaped him, who had loved him, who had given everything for him. James, he said. After my dad. And Severus. James Severus Potter. Ginny squeezed his hand. He would have loved that. Yeah, Harry said softly. I think he would have. James Severus Potter was born on a warm July night, screaming his arrival to the world. Harry held him for the first time, looking down at the tiny face, the wisp of dark hair, the eyes that would eventually turn green like his mother's. Hello, James, he whispered. I'm your dad. I'm going to love you more than anything in the world. I'm going to protect you and teach you and watch you grow. And I'm going to tell you stories. Stories about your grandparents, and your godfathers, and a man named Severus who saved us all. The baby's eyes fluttered open, unfocused. But aware. Harry felt a connection snap into place, a love so profound it took his breath away. Welcome to the world, little one. It's beautiful and scary and wonderful. But don't worry. I'll be here, always. He looked up at the window, at the stars just beginning to appear in the darkening sky. You too, he whispered. All of you. Watch over him. Keep him safe. I'll do the rest. The stars twinkled, and Harry smiled. Chapter 26, The Stories We Tell. James grew fast. Too fast, Harry thought, watching him take his first steps, speak his first words, brew his first disastrous potion at the age of 5. He had Harry's hair and Ginny's eyes, a combination that made Harry catch his breath every time he looked at him. But James also had something else. Something Harry recognized. A gravity, sometimes, in his young eyes. A thoughtfulness beyond his years. The mark of a child who would carry weight, who would face challenges, who would need to be strong. Harry told him stories. Not just bedtime stories, but real stories. Stories about the war, about the people who had fought and died, about the love that had saved them all. He started when James was old enough to understand, sitting on his bed each night and weaving tales of bravery and sacrifice. Tell me about Grandpa Severus again, James would say, his eyes wide. And Harry would tell him. About the boy from Spinner's End who loved a girl with red hair. About the mistakes he made and the choices that defined him. About the years of silent protection, the love he could never voice, the final sacrifice. He was the bravest man I ever knew, Harry would say. He wasn't perfect. He made terrible mistakes. But he spent the rest of his life trying to make up for them. And in the end, he saved us all. James would listen, rapt, absorbing every word. And when the story was done, he would touch the ring on Harry's finger, the Prince ring, and smile. "I'm named after him," he would say. "Part of me is him." "Yes," Harry would agree. "Part of you is him. And part of him is you." That's how love works. It never really ends. Lily arrived 2 years after James. She had red hair like her grandmother and her mother's fierce spirit. From the moment she could talk, she demanded stories too. "Tell me about Grandma Lily," she would say, climbing into Harry's lap. And Harry would tell her about the girl who had been kind to a lonely boy, who had seen the best in people, who had given her life to save her son. "She was brave and beautiful and good," Harry would say. "And she loved you before you were even born. She would have adored you." Lily would touch the ring on Harry's finger, the Evans ring, and smile. "I have her name. Part of her is me. All of her is in you," Harry would say. "Her spirit, her kindness, her strength. You carry her with you, always." The third child was a surprise. Another boy, born when James was 7 and Lily was 5. They named him Albus Sirius, a name that carried the weight of 2 extraordinary men. Albus was different from his siblings. Quieter, more observant. He would sit for hours, watching, thinking, absorbing. Harry saw something of Snape in him, and something of Dumbledore too. "Tell me about Uncle Sirius," Albus would ask, his voice soft. And Harry would tell him about the man who had been his father's best friend, who had been wrongly imprisoned, who had fought and died for what was right. "He was funny and brave and loyal," Harry would say. "He loved me before he even knew me. He would have loved you too." Albus would nod, filing the information away, building his own understanding of the world. The children grew, and Harry continued to tell stories. He told them about Remus, the gentle werewolf who had taught him to conjure up Patronus. He told them about Tonks, whose hair changed color with her mood. He told them about Fred, who could make anyone laugh, even in the darkest times. He told them about the battle, about the fear and the courage and the cost. He didn't shield them from the truth. They needed to know. They needed to understand. But he also told them about the peace. About the rebuilding. About the hope that had emerged from the ashes. "The war ended," he would say. "But the love didn't. It never does. It just keeps going, passing from one person to the next, growing stronger with each generation." The children would look at him with their young, serious faces, and Harry would see it. The legacy. The future. The hope. One night, when James was 11 and about to leave for Hogwarts, he came to Harry's study. He was nervous, fidgeting with the strap of his trunk. "Dad, can I ask you something?" Harry set down his quill. "Anything. Do you think Grandpa Severus would have been proud of me?" Harry's heart clenched. He crossed to his son and knelt, taking his hands. "James, listen to me. Severus Snape was the proudest, most protective person I ever knew. If he could see you now, smart and brave and kind and good, he would be bursting with pride. He would probably hide it behind a sneer and a sharp comment, but he would feel it. Deep in his heart, he would feel it." James smiled, a wobbly, uncertain smile. "You think so? I know so." Harry pulled him into a hug. "I'm proud of you too. More than I can say. You're going to be amazing at Hogwarts. You're going to make friends and learn things and have adventures. And whenever you need me, I'll be there. Always." James hugged him back, tight. "Thanks, Dad." After he left, Harry sat in his chair, staring at the fire. He thought of Snape, of all the moments they had shared, all the love that had passed between them. He thought of his son, off to begin his own journey. The legacy continued. The love endured. And somewhere, Harry was sure, Severus Snape was watching, and smiling. Chapter 27, The Hogwarts Letter. The envelope was cream-colored, addressed in emerald green ink. Harry held it in his hands, feeling the weight of it, the significance. It was the first Hogwarts letter for his son. James stood before him, barely able to contain his excitement. "Is it really? Is it from Hogwarts?" Harry smiled. "It is. Open it." James tore it open, his eyes flying across the page. Supplies. Robes. Wand. A list of books. And at the bottom, the house he would be sorted into, to be determined. "I'm going to Hogwarts," James shouted, running to find his mother. Mum, I'm going to Hogwarts." Harry watched him go, a lump in his throat. He remembered his own letter, delivered by Snape with that same mixture of pride and fear. He remembered the journey, the sorting, the years that followed. And he remembered something else. A promise he had made to himself, long ago. That his children would never feel alone. That they would always know they were loved. He followed James into the kitchen, where Ginny was already being assaulted with hugs and questions. Lily was bouncing with excitement, and Albus was watching with his usual quiet intensity. "We need to go to Diagon Alley," Ginny said. "Soon. The school year starts in a month." "I'll take him," Harry said. "Alone. Like Snape took me." Ginny understood. She always understood. "Of course. Take your time. We'll be here." Diagon Alley was as bustling and magical as Harry remembered. James's eyes were wide as saucers, taking in everything at once. The Ollery, the apothecary, Flourish and Blots. But Harry steered him first to Ollivander's. The old wandmaker was still there, older and frailer but still sharp-eyed. He looked at James with the same penetrating gaze he had turned on Harry. So many years ago. "Ah, another Potter. Let's see what chooses you." The process was the same. Wand after wand, rejected. James grew frustrated, but Harry put a hand on his shoulder. "Be patient. The right one will come." Finally, Ollivander returned with a box. Holly and Phoenix feather. 11 inches. Nice and supple. The moment James touched it, sparks flew. Golden and bright, filling the shop with light. Ollivander's eyes gleamed. "Curious. Very curious. The phoenix whose feather is in your wand, it gave 2 feathers. One went to your father. The other went to the Dark Lord." James's face went pale. He looked at Harry, fear in his eyes. Harry knelt beside him. "It's okay. It's just a wand. It doesn't define you. You define it. Remember that." James nodded, gripping the wand tightly. As they left the shop, Harry glanced back at Ollivander. The old man nodded, a knowing look in his eyes. The legacy continued. They visited the other shops, buying robes and cauldrons and books. James chattered constantly, excited and nervous and full of questions. Harry answered them all, patient and calm. Finally, they stopped at Florine Fortescue's ice cream parlor. They sat at a small table, eating sundaes and watching the crowd. "Dad," James said, his spoon halfway to his mouth. "What house were you in?" "Gryffindor." "What house was Grandpa Severus in?" Harry smiled. "Slytherin." James's face fell slightly. "Oh, James, listen to me." Harry leaned forward. "The house doesn't matter. It really doesn't. What matters is who you are, the choices you make, the way you treat people. Severus Snape was in Slytherin, and he was the bravest man I ever knew. Some of my best friends were in Slytherin. It's not about the house. It's about the person." James considered this. "But what if I'm in Slytherin? Everyone says they're all bad. Everyone is wrong." Harry's voice was firm. "If you're in Slytherin, you'll be in the house of ambition and cunning and resourcefulness. You'll be in the house of Severus Snape. And I will be proud of you, no matter what." James smiled, some of the tension leaving his face. "Okay, Dad. I'll remember." The train ride was emotional. Ginny cried, of course. Lily clung to James, not wanting to let go. Albus stood quietly, watching his big brother with something like awe. Harry pulled James aside for a final word. "Remember what I told you. Be yourself. Be kind. Be brave. And if you ever need me, for anything, just send an owl. I'll be there." James hugged him tightly. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, son. More than you'll ever know." He watched James board the train, finding a compartment with other first years. He watched until the train disappeared around a bend, taking his son into a new world. Ginny took his hand. "He'll be fine. I know." Harry wiped his eyes. I remember what it was like. How scared I was. How alone I felt." "You weren't alone. You had Snape." Harry nodded. "Yeah, I did. And James has us. He has a family. He has love. That's all that matters." They stood together on the platform, watching the spot where the train had been. Then, slowly, they turned and walked away, back to the life they had built, back to the children who still needed them. The legacy continued. The love endured. And somewhere, Harry was sure, Snape was watching, and smiling. Chapter 28, The Slytherin Heir. The letter came 3 weeks into term. Harry was in his classroom at Hogwarts, grading essays, when the owl arrived. He recognized the handwriting immediately, James's, still childish but improving. He opened it with trembling hands. Dear Dad, I'm in Slytherin. I know you said it didn't matter, but I'm scared. Everyone looks at me differently now. Even some of the teachers. They don't say anything, but I can tell. They're surprised. Disappointed, maybe. The other Slytherins are nice, mostly. But some of them keep asking about you. About the war. About Grandpa Severus. They want to know what it was like, being raised by a Death Eater. They don't understand. They don't know what he really was. I tried to explain, but they just looked at me funny. One boy said, he was still a Death Eater, wasn't he? Once a snake, always a snake. I hit him. I know I shouldn't have, but I did. I got detention for a week. I don't know what to do, Dad. I don't know who I am anymore. Am I bad because I'm in Slytherin? Is that what everyone thinks? Please write back. I need you. Love, James. Harry set the letter down, his heart aching. He remembered that feeling. The isolation. The confusion. The fear that your house defined you. He wrote back immediately. My dearest James, I am so proud of you. Not despite being in Slytherin, but because of who you are. You are brave and kind and good. Those things don't change based on a hat's decision. I told you the story of Severus Snape for a reason. He was in Slytherin. He made terrible mistakes. But he also did extraordinary things. He loved deeply. He sacrificed everything. He saved us all. Slytherin is not a mark of evil. It is a mark of ambition, of resourcefulness, of determination. These are not bad qualities. They are tools, like any other. It is how you use them that matters. You hit a boy who insulted your grandfather. That was wrong. Violence is never the answer. But I understand why you did it. You were defending someone you love. That instinct, to protect, to stand up for what's right, that is what matters. Be yourself, James. Be the boy I raised. Be kind to those who are struggling. Be brave when it's hard. Be proud of who you are, Slytherin and all. And remember, Severus Snape was the bravest man I ever knew. He was also a Slytherin. The two are not mutually exclusive. I love you more than words can say. Always have. Always will. Dad. P.S. Write to me anytime. I am always here. The reply came 3 days later. Dear Dad, thank you. I read your letter 100 times. It helped. It really did. I talked to my head of house, Professor Slughorn. He knew Grandpa Severus. He told me stories about him, good stories. About how brilliant he was, how dedicated, how much he cared about his students. It made me feel better. I also talked to the boy I hit. I apologized. He apologized too. We're not friends, exactly, but we're not enemies anymore. He said he didn't understand about Grandpa Severus. He just heard stories. I lent him the article you gave me, the one from the prophet. He read it and said he was sorry. I think I'm going to be okay, Dad. I think I'm going to be fine. Thank you for believing in me. Love, James. Harry folded the letter carefully, placing it with the others. His son was going to be okay. He was going to be more than okay. He was going to be extraordinary. Just like the man he was named after. Chapter 29, The Portrait. The request came in the spring of James's first year. A formal letter from the Hogwarts Board of Governors, asking Harry to attend a special ceremony. They were finally installing a portrait of Severus Snape in the headmaster's office, alongside the other great leaders of the school. Harry accepted, of course. He wouldn't have missed it for anything. The ceremony was small and dignified. McGonagall spoke, her voice warm with memory. Kingsley Shacklebolt attended, representing the ministry. A few former students who had known Snape, including, surprisingly, Draco Malfoy, were there. And then, the moment Harry had been waiting for. The portrait was unveiled. It was perfect. Snape stood in his usual pose, arms crossed, expression stern. But his eyes held a warmth that the living Snape had rarely shown. The artist had captured something essential. The man beneath the mask. Harry approached the portrait, his heart pounding. Severus, he whispered. The portrait's eyes moved, focusing on him. And then, impossibly, the painted lips curved into a faint smile. Harry. It was just a portrait. A magical echo. But for that moment, it was enough. I have so much to tell you, Harry said. About my life. About my family. About James. I named him after you, you know. James Severus. He's in Slytherin. He's brilliant and brave and kind. You would love him. The portrait nodded slowly. I am sure I would. He carries your ring. The prince ring. He wears it every day. He asks about you constantly. He wants to know everything. Then you must tell him. The portrait's voice was soft. Tell him everything. The good and the bad. He deserves the truth. Harry nodded, tears pricking his eyes. I will. I promise. They stood in silence for a moment, father and son, separated by death but connected by love. I miss you, Harry said finally. Every day. The portrait's eyes softened. I know. I miss you too. But I am proud of you, Harry. So proud. You have become everything I hoped you would be. Harry wiped his eyes. Thank you. For everything. For raising me. For protecting me. For loving me. It was my honor. The portrait smiled again, wider this time. Now go. Live your life. Love your family. Be happy. That is all I ever wanted. Harry nodded, unable to speak. He turned and walked away, but he carried the moment with him. The knowledge that Snape's legacy lived on, in portraits and memories in the hearts of those who loved him. Chapter 30, The Prince's Shadow. The years passed, as years do. Harry continued teaching at Hogwarts, watching generations of students pass through his classroom. James graduated, became an Auror, married a lovely witch from Ravenclaw. Lily followed, becoming a healer, her red hair and fierce spirit a constant reminder of the grandmother she never knew. Albus, the quiet one, surprised everyone by becoming a potions master, taking over the classroom that bore Snape's name. Harry visited Spinner's End often. The house had become a pilgrimage site of sorts, for those who knew the story. He didn't mind. He would sit in the front room, in Snape's armchair, and remember. The fire would crackle, the potions would bubble, and for a little while, it would feel like old times. The journals were now kept in a special case, preserved for future generations. Harry had considered publishing them, but decided against it. Some things were private, some things were sacred. Instead, he read from them to his grandchildren, on quiet evenings when they asked about the man in the portrait. He would tell them about Severus Snape, the boy from Spinner's End, the man who had loved and loved again. He would tell them about the sacrifices, the courage, the love that had saved them all. The children would listen, their eyes wide, and when the story was done, they would touch the rings on their own fingers, replicas of the prince ring, crafted for each of them on their 11th birthdays. Tell us more, they would say. Tell us about the prince. And Harry would smile, and begin again. The end came, as it must for all. Harry was old, older than he had ever imagined being. His hair was white, his face lined, his body tired. But his eyes were still green, still bright, still full of love. Ginny had gone first, 5 years earlier. He missed her every day, but he knew she was waiting for him, somewhere beyond. His children and grandchildren surrounded him, their faces familiar and beloved. On his last night, he asked to be alone. They understood. They kissed him goodbye, one by one, and left him to his memories. He lay in his bed, looking at the ceiling, thinking about his life. It had been extraordinary, in so many ways. Full of pain and loss, yes. But also full of love. So much love. He thought of his parents, their faces frozen in a photograph. He thought of Sirius, laughing in the firelight. He thought of Remus, gentle and wise. He thought of Dumbledore, twinkling and mysterious. He thought of Ginny, his heart, his home. And he thought of Snape. The man who had found him on a doorstep, cold and alone. The man who had raised him, taught him, protected him. The man who had loved him, silently and fiercely, for his entire life. Harry reached up and touched the rings on his finger. The Evans ring, the Prince ring. They had never left his hand, not once in all these years. I'm coming, he whispered. I'm finally coming home. He closed his eyes, and the darkness was warm and welcoming. And in that darkness, he saw a light. A figure, approaching. Tall and thin, dressed in black. A familiar face, stern but softening. Severus, Harry breathed. The figure smiled. Real this time. Not a portrait. Not a memory. Real. Well done, Harry, Snape said, his voice warm with love. Well done. Harry reached out, and Snape took his hand. Together, they walked into the light. In the days that followed, the wizarding world mourned. Harry Potter, the boy who lived, the man who conquered, was gone. But his legacy lived on, in his children and grandchildren, in the students he had taught, in the lives he had touched. And in a small house in Spinner's End, the fire continued to burn. The potions continued to bubble. And in the front room, in an old armchair, a shadow sat watching. The shadow of a prince. The shadow of a father. The shadow of a love that would never die. The house at Spinner's End had changed over the years. Not dramatically, the bones were the same, the narrow stairs, the cramped rooms, the ever-present scent of potions and old books. But small things had shifted. Flowers grew in the window boxes now, a riot of color that Snape would have hated and secretly loved. The front door had been painted a deep, forest green. A small brass plaque beside it read, "The Severus Snape Memorial Library, open by appointment." Harry's children had maintained it after he was gone, turning it into a resource for potions masters and historians, a place where scholars could study Snape's original recipes and journals. But it was also a home, still. The front room, with its worn armchair and crackling fire, was preserved exactly as it had been. A place for family. A place for memory. James Potter, now in his 60s, with gray streaking his black hair and his father's green eyes, sat in that armchair on a cold November evening. The fire crackled before him, casting dancing shadows on the walls. In his hands, he held a leather-bound journal, the last of his grandfather's that he hadn't yet read. He had been coming here more often since his father's passing. The house comforted him, connected him to something larger than himself. His own children were grown now, with children of their own. He was a grandfather, a patriarch, the keeper of stories. The journal in his hands was different from the others. It was older, the leather cracked and faded, the pages yellowed with age. It had been hidden in a compartment in Snape's desk, one Harry had never found. James had discovered it by accident, his hand brushing against a hidden spring while cleaning. He opened it carefully, the spine creaking in protest. The handwriting was Snape's, but younger, more hurried. The first entry was dated 1971. His first year at Hogwarts. September 1, 1971. I don't know why I'm writing this. Mother gave me this journal before I left, said it might help to have somewhere to put my thoughts. She doesn't understand that thoughts are the problem. They're what keep me awake at night, what make the other boys look at me strangely. The train was awful. I sat alone for most of it, until a boy from my year found me. He's loud, annoying, talks too much. But he didn't seem to mind that my clothes were too big or that I didn't know the right things to say. His name is Mulciber. He says his family knows about magic. Real magic. Not the watered-down stuff they teach in books. I don't know if I like him. But he's the only one who talked to me. James read on, engrossed. The early journals chronicled Snape's loneliness, his desperation for belonging, his growing friendship with boys who would later become Death Eaters. It was painful to read, knowing what was coming. But it was also illuminating. December 1972. Lily isn't speaking to me. Not really. We exchange hellos in the corridors, but it's not the same. She's always with Potter and his friends now. They laugh at me when I pass. Potter hexed me yesterday, just for walking by. My robes caught fire. I had to put it out myself, and everyone watched. Lily was there. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me with those eyes, and then she turned away. I hate them. I hate all of them. Mulciber says there are ways to make people like that pay. He says there's power in the dark arts, real power. Power to protect yourself. Power to make them afraid. I'm listening. James set the journal down, his heart heavy. This was the boy his grandfather had been. Angry, hurt, desperate for power. It was easy to see how he had been led astray. He picked up the next journal, dated a few years later. June 1975. I did something terrible today. Or maybe I didn't. I don't know anymore. Mulciber and Avery cornered that Muggle-born girl, Mary MacDonald. They wanted to teach her a lesson, they said. I didn't join in. I just watched. But I didn't stop them either. Lily found out. She came to me, furious, demanding to know if I was involved. I told her I wasn't. It was true. But the way she looked at me, she knew. She knew I hadn't helped. She knew I had let it happen. You're changing, Sev, she said. I don't know you anymore. I wanted to tell her she was wrong. I wanted to tell her I was still the boy from the playground, the one who showed her magic. But I couldn't. Because that boy is gone. And I don't know who replaced him. The entries grew darker. The mark on his arm. The first mission. The first kill. And underneath it all, the constant, aching presence of Lily, the love he had thrown away, the loss that would define him. Then, the prophecy. October 1981. I have made a terrible mistake. The worst of my life. I heard a prophecy, told it to the Dark Lord. I thought it was just information, another piece of the puzzle. I didn't know. I didn't realize. He's chosen them. The Potters. He's going after Lily. I went to Dumbledore. I begged. I would do anything, give anything, if he would just protect her. He asked what I would give in return. I said anything. Everything. I meant it. I meant every word. If she dies because of me, I will never forgive myself. I will spend the rest of my life trying to atone. I will protect her son, if he survives. I will give him everything I never had. This is my vow. This is my promise. This is my last chance at redemption. James wiped his eyes, tears falling freely now. He knew the rest of the story. He knew the sacrifice, the years of silent protection, the love that had shaped his father's life. The final entry was dated the night before Snape's death. April 30, 1998. Tomorrow, I will die. I feel it. The Dark Lord suspects. It's only a matter of time. I'm not afraid. Not for myself. I've been dead inside for years, ever since Lily left this world. But I'm afraid for Harry. He's so young, so brave, so foolish. He has her eyes, her heart, her goodness. And he has James's courage, his recklessness, his stubborn refusal to give up. I raised him as best I could. I made mistakes, so many mistakes. But I loved him. I hope he knows that. I hope, wherever I am after this, he knows that he was the best thing in my life. The only good thing. Harry, if you ever read this, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you in person. I'm sorry I couldn't be the father you deserved. But I want you to know, you made me proud. Every single day. From the moment you grasped my finger on that cold doorstep, you made me proud. Be happy. Live well. Love deeply. That's all I ever wanted for you. Your father, Severus. James closed the journal, holding it against his chest. The fire had burned low, the room growing cold, but he didn't notice. He was too lost in the words, in the love that poured from every page. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for loving him. Thank you for saving him. Thank you for giving us all a chance. He sat there for a long time, the silence of the house wrapping around him like a blanket. Outside, the mill hummed its eternal song. Inside, the shadows danced. And in the corner of the room, just at the edge of his vision, James thought he saw something. A figure, tall and thin, dressed in black. It stood watching him, its face hidden in shadow. James didn't flinch. He knew that shadow. He had grown up with its stories. Hello, grandfather, he said softly. The figure didn't move, but James felt a warmth spread through the room. A presence. A blessing. I'll take care of it, James promised, holding up the journal. I'll take care of all of it. The house. The memories. The love. I'll pass it on to my children, and they'll pass it on to theirs. It will never end. The figure seemed to nod. Then, slowly, it faded, merging with the shadows until there was nothing left but the firelight and the quiet. James smiled, wiping his eyes one last time. He placed the journal with the others, in the special case that protected them. Then he sat back in the armchair, watching the fire, feeling the warmth. The legacy continued. The love endured. And somewhere, in the space between shadow and light, Severus Snape was watching over them all. And that is just the beginning of Harry's true destiny. If you want to see how far his power rises, or how the wizarding world reacts next, make sure you like this video and comment if you want part 2. And hey, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe right now. Because I upload daily dark and powerful Harry Potter what-if stories. And trust me, the next one will be even more insane. And I'll see you in the next magical chapter. Until then, stay legendary.